And welcome into this National Signing Day Round 2. Already had some movement this morning as Jaden Rashada is taking his talents to Tempe, Arizona, but there is a lot going on today. The future of college football is putting pen to paper. Alongside me to break it all down, the man, the myth, the legend, national recruiting analyst for us here at On3, Josh Newberg. Josh, how we feeling, my guy?
I'm feeling great. It's my first signing day at On3, the first full cycle, your first full cycle as well. And everybody watching, it's your first full cycle with On3 too. So we are here. The cake's baked, the hay's in the barn, whatever the sayings are. Most of it's already done, but there is still some drama left here on National Signing Day.
Still some pieces that are yet to fall into the puzzle for some of these programs, especially at the back half of that top 20. But some teams in the top 10 still looking to add a couple more pieces, a little more icing on the cake, if you will. Also here to join us and break it all down, the man with the scoop, National Director of Recruiting for us here at On3, Chad Simmons. Chad, how we doing, brother?
Doing great, man. To be with you guys, man, you feel the energy, the vibe. Happy to be here, man. Gonna be a lot of fun.
It's a celebration. It's a celebration, and you're dressed accordingly to the nines. I wish the people could see your whole fit. What are you rocking on the feet today?
Jordan 1 lows, a little bit of maroon, a little bit of gray. Try to blend in pretty well.
There we go. Got the top 4 set behind you with Texas, Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, of course, not in that order. Josh, how about you talk about the order for us just a little bit here? Again, not a ton of movement expected within this top 10, but let's just reset the table a little bit for us before we get into the madness that is National Signing Day.
You know, you got Alabama on top with their signing day class. Like you said all cycle, Bama is gonna Bama.
Yep.
They're number 1 and by a wide margin. Georgia with almost a borderline historic class for them. They're at number 2 and they're not even close to overtaking Alabama at the number 1 spot. Then we see Texas, Ohio State, LSU's a big mover. Miami drops to 6. See, the last time at early signing period, it was Miami at 4 and LSU at 6, but Miami loses Cormani McClain, and they drop 2 spots to number 6. Now you got Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Oregon, and Clemson. Clemson enters the top 10. They were not here during the early signing day, but with Florida losing the NLI of Jaden Rashada, it gives Clemson an opportunity to jump into that top 10. There you see Florida at 11, Tennessee, Penn State, USC, Texas A&M, Auburn, South Carolina, TCU, Michigan, and Florida State round out the top 20. There could be some more movement, though. I mean, Oregon and South Carolina are battling it out right now for the number 1 athlete in America, Nicholas Harbor. Could go either way. Roderick Pleasant, the top uncommitted corner, is still yet to go. That's a USC-Oregon battle. So there's still some movement that could happen today.
Still some pieces on the chessboard for a lot of these programs. Like you said, outside that top 10 is where we expect to see most of movement today. Is there a team specifically you're watching that's outside the top 10? Maybe it's a Florida at 11. Maybe it's South Carolina in that 17-18 range. What team are you watching most closely today that's trying to make a move up the rankings?
I think South Carolina and USC. I think they have the opportunity. There's enough firepower on the board for those 2 programs with top 100 guys out there to make a move. Now, nobody's going to make a huge jump. We're not going to see 6, 7, 8 spots, but we could see some teams move up.
Like you mentioned, already some movement this morning. Jaden Rashada taking his talents to Arizona State. And you were actually talking to people early this morning about what could be going on there. What's the latest right now in Jaden Rashada's commitment?
I mean, moments before we got on air, Jaden Rashada makes it official. And one of the big questions going into the day was Jaden Rashada even going to make a decision today? Was he going to end his recruitment today? We all know what happened. You know, during the summer, he pulls a shocker. He commits to Miami over Florida. We didn't really see that one coming. Then on November 7th, almost at midnight, he makes the announcement that I am flipping my commitment from Miami to the in-state rival Florida Gators. That commitment really got things rolling for the Gators all the way up until what happened. It was December 21st. That's when we got the first inkling that maybe something's wrong with his commitment to the Florida Gators. It was decision day, December 21st, early signing period. He delayed his decision. We didn't know what was wrong. Billy Napier even delayed his press conference that day.
There was some murmurs, some uncomfortable buzz in the air.
But Jaden Rashada did get the NLI in. Then he planned on enrolling with the rest of his teammates in the class on January 8th, but he no-showed. A couple days later, it all comes out. Jaden Rashada requests his release for his NLI and was back on the market. So let's throw it to Chad Simmons for some intel on how exactly Jaden Rashada ended up at Arizona State.
Yeah, I think it goes down to one person. That's Kenny Dillingham. Obviously, if you don't know, Jaden's father played at Arizona State. His brother now lives in the Tempe area, so obviously there's some connections there as well. But I think it starts with the head man, Dillingham. Obviously, recruited him early at Florida State. Then he moved to OC at Oregon. Had him on multiple visits there to Eugene. They brought him in, a week and a half or so ago to Arizona State. It was really just almost like a business trip, not your normal recruiting visit. It wasn't about the glitz, the glamour. It wasn't about the photo shoot. It was Dillingham saying, hey, look, you know me. I know you. The connection is there. Take a look around. If you like the fit, you like the people, you like the environment, hey, we want you. If not, check out TCU. Come back, let's see what happens. End of the day, Dillingham got a guy he really liked. He thinks can thrive in his offensive scheme, and it's a big win, early on for Kenny Dillingham.
Yeah, and in an era of NIL, that's all you hear about, especially with Jaden Rashada. This one, and I spoke to some sources this morning and last night that tell me there was no NIL deal here. Now, Arizona State is doing something maybe a little differently from most programs, but no incoming recruits are getting NIL deals. Only players on the current team that have proven that they play are open to NIL opportunities. So here, in the era of NIL, like Chad said, relationships win out. And this is incredibly important to Kenny Dillingham. You look at what happens in year one, you got to get your quarterback. I mean, there's a reason why Billy Napier and Mario Cristobal fought so hard to land Jaden Rashada, because in year one, you got to get that signal caller that's going to be the future of your team. In Jaden Rashada, this wasn't a 6-week recruitment. Like Chad said, Kenny Dillingham knew Rashada from Florida State, again at Oregon, now comes to Arizona State, and it all just comes together. He gets his big-time quarterback in year really 0 for Kenny
Essentially,
Dillingham, not
yeah.
even year 1.
And that's a huge building block. Like you said, to have the quarterback of the future, whether he plays this coming season or not, you got your guy that's set up to do some good things in Tempe, a 4-star caliber player, a guy that Charles Power loves, his 3-level passing ability, meaning he can spray it deep, he can hit you in the intermediate stuff, great in the short game, like a guy that really has a ton of tools to continue to develop. Now he's going to do so in Tempe under Kenny Dillingham. Chad, I want to get your thoughts on this. Drew Pine transferred from Notre Dame to ASU. Does playing early, you think, play a factor in Jaden Rashada's commitment to the Sun Devils?
Well, I think like any kid, he'd love to get on the field, right away, at Arizona State. But I don't think that was a factor. He does see an opportunity to go in there and compete for sure, if not for starting, maybe some reps behind Pine in year 1 and groom himself to be that guy fully in year 2.
No, absolutely.
I honestly think with everything that's gone on in Rashada's recruitment, with all these adults coming in and mucking it up and just creating absolute chaos for Jaden Rashada, I think it's good for him to go and sit a year behind Drew Pine, who's a veteran, who's coming from Notre Dame, who was a national recruit himself coming out of high school. And I think this is an ideal situation for Jaden Rashada to step into.
And even to get out of California, right? I mean, that was one thing of like he was looking at Cal maybe, and Washington was in the mix, but just to get to somewhere that's maybe a little bit less familiar than your backyard and playing at Cal Berkeley, I'm sure Cal Berkeley would have been a great fit as well. But for him to be under a guy like Kenny Dillingham, where the relational aspect is so much accentuated and emphasized in his recruitment, feels like a good fit for him. Yeah. So excited to watch the rest of his college career play out now, as he will get to step between the white lines. I want to talk more about his NIL situation here in just a few short minutes, but there are some other big fish that are still on the board right now. Nicholas Harbor, Deuce Robinson's got some buzz around him and what he may or may not do today. Chad, I want to throw it to you. What are you hearing as far as some of these guys that are now still uncommitted? Jaden Rashada obviously went off the board this morning and is going to be a Sun Devil, but with other guys here, we got Nicholas Harbor, Roger Pleasant, Deuce Robinson. What's the latest buzz on those guys as Nicholas Harbor is going to commit today, actually? Yeah,
with Harbor, we're a little bit less than an hour away, I guess, from Nicholas Harbor. And been working the phones all this morning, of course, late last night. I mean, I don't think anybody, based on my intel, no schools have been given the yes, I'm coming. So, based on what I'm hearing right now, it's Oregon versus South Carolina. I know we had numerous calls yesterday with both of those programs. Maryland had a call yesterday, still working the phones this morning. Maryland, the in-state program, right, just 30 minutes away from home. But Josh mentioned how relationships still matter. We'll see today if South Carolina wins out for Nicholas Harbor. It's about, I think, relationships. If Oregon wins out for Nicholas Harbor, it's about that branding, that NIL, that marketing. So you're seeing which way he goes today. Is it Oregon, who got in this very late, got the last visit, Or is it about Carolina, who's been there for 2+ years? He knows the track staff, the football staff, very comfortable with the players, the recruits there. So to me, it's like relationships versus that NIL marketing branding for Nicholas Harbor here in about roughly an hour or so. Roderick Pleasant also, Oregon, very much in the mix there, kind of giving the Ducks a slight edge over the local program, USC. Again, he's a track star, also an elite 4-star cornerback out of Gardenia Serra High School right outside the LA area. So a hometown kid for USC. They want to keep him home, but right now the buzz is a little bit more heavy around the Oregon Ducks. You mentioned a guy like Deuce Robinson. We all thought just 2 or 3 days ago, at least I felt good about him picking Georgia today. Now he may not pick anyone. And I also hear USC's in the mix. Texas is in the mix. And, of course, you have baseball. He's weighing those options about should he sign, should he not sign, wait for the MLB draft. A lot of people are in his ear right now from both sides, from recruiting, from that Georgia staff, Texas staff, USC staff, and then all the different baseball experts about where or how this could affect his draft potential come summertime. So a lot of storylines still out there.
Chad, I got a question when it comes to Deuce Robinson. If we see him pass on signing today and taking this into the month of February and maybe even into March, is there a team in his recruitment that benefits?
I mean, I would probably say no, not one specific team. I mean, obviously, one thing I did learn this week is that, we've talked before, Josh, on Inside Scoop numerous times about Deuce, his in-home visits. Texas did get the last in-home last week on Thursday.
Okay.
Now, I'm hearing still Georgia and USC are the main two, but Texas has to be considered in there as well. But obviously, I think, the longer he goes, he's going to take some, obviously, baseball, tournaments and trips. Could he end up visiting Texas again if he's playing baseball in Texas? He has family in Texas. Obviously, the Dodgers, he worked out for the LA Dodgers here recently. Could he go back there and go visit USC again? Will baseball take him to that famous East Cobb in Georgia? And he'll be up in Athens again. So, I mean, I don't think time really favors one specific team, but maybe the longer he goes, the more it hurts Georgia, who's been trending as the favorite, for at least on my end, for the last couple of months.
Okay, I'm not going to lie. I'm a little skeptical that this delay is baseball related because the baseball draft is in July, and I don't really understand what he's waiting for. Are you hearing there's any concern maybe over Georgia's OC moving on, or is there any football concerns that are maybe playing into this delay for Deuce Robinson?
Yeah, the first thing I heard about Deuce potentially delaying a decision was based on the Todd Monken interview with the Ravens, Tampa Bay Bucks. But based on what I've gotten the last day and a half, it's been more centered around baseball. And I did talk to a baseball expert that's been tied to the Braves in my area in Atlanta. And he said one thing that Deuce could be hearing or could be thinking about is if he did sign today or tomorrow, sometime early this week or whatnot, with Texas, Georgia, or USC, the baseball draft teams could look at that as an obstacle and a reason not to draft him high in that first round and commit that pick to Deuce. Then they have to get him away from Georgia, Texas, USC. We know NIL is a factor. He could get money from one of those programs. Also, he wants to play football. So if he did sign, he could be hearing that, hey, if you go sign with Georgia, are we sure if we draft you at number 9 with the LA Dodgers, you would come to us? So that's something that was tossed my way yesterday about maybe a potential reason. He just doesn't sign at all, lets the draft play out, see where he gets drafted, and then walk on as a football player under an MLB baseball contract.
All right.
I think that's one thing, yeah.
So here, this is interesting. It sounds like the Dodgers are worried about flipping him from Georgia.
Which, I mean, is fair. And I think one concern for college football fans is this recruitment wears on, especially if he doesn't end up signing today. The concern is, okay, is he going to play college football at all?
Right.
Chad, I mean, in your mind, is this something where if he doesn't sign today, it favors more and more the Major League Baseball route? Or what's the level of concern college football fans should have about Deuce Robinson playing college football at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think he does want to play football. He loves the game. His dad played both football and baseball at Florida State. So his dad's a big trainer in the Phoenix, Arizona area, works with baseball, football, a very great athlete in his own right in his time as well. I think in the perfect world, Deuce wants to play football at a high level in college, but would also love to have in the off season not be at college baseball, but be in a pro facility training with them, whether it be the Dodgers, the Braves, the Astros, whoever was to draft him and sign him. So I think in the perfect world, he wants to play big boy football in the Power 5 and then also be in a major league industry in the off-season training and playing spring training baseball.
Yeah, probably a better locker room there in the Dodgers facility than trying to get, going in your high school facility. But regardless, another athlete who's looking at playing another sport at the collegiate level, Nicholas Harbor, with hopes to eventually run in the Olympics. It's like sub 10, 300 meters, 6'5", 225 pounds. You should not be able to move at that pace, at that size. What is the impact you're hearing in regards to schools like Oregon or USC, or how much is he weighing the track possibility or track opportunities at his next stop?
Oh, it's huge, JD. I mean, that's his, like I told Josh, his ultimate goal. He's not even thinking about an NFL first-round guy. He's thinking about running in the Olympic Games. So that tells you enough right there that track weighs heavily in this decision. So when he makes a decision here shortly, whether he stays home and goes to Maryland, goes down to the SEC country, goes to South Carolina, or goes across the country to Oregon with that Phil Knight facility, with the marketing, the branding, the Nike guy, track will weigh heavily in this decision. He wants to go offensively on football because he wants to preserve that body, stay lean, stay fast, stay healthy, not get banged up, because track is that important.
We're about just under 45 minutes away from Nicholas Harbor's announcement on where he's going to attend school. Chad, I got a question though. He stars on both sides of the football. Are South Carolina and Oregon both want him on offense, or does one want him on offense, one want him on defense? How's that working out?
They just want him. They want Nick Harbor.
Figure it out when he gets there.
I think most schools have now. And I'll say this. He did bring it to my attention that Mike Loxley, which is where his mother and sister went to school at Maryland, right down the road, actually was the first coach to bring up, hey, have you thought about playing offense? You're a gifted athlete. You can do this. You want to run track. And I think, obviously, South Carolina, they've had coaches on both sides of the ball recruiting him for that edge rush guy. Also, Jody Wright, the tight ends coach at South Carolina. Oregon, Dan Lanning just says, hey, man, just come to Eugene, wear that Nike swoosh. You can play wherever you want in our program. And I think most schools have kind of told him that over the last month to 2 months, but I think most schools know that he wants to play offense, and they're going to all give him that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Well, we're going to find out here in under 45 minutes. Nicholas Harbor is the #1 athlete in America, and he would be the first 5-star recruit for both South Carolina and Oregon in this cycle. So
very high stakes.
Very important to both programs.
Very high stakes. Well, Chad, we appreciate you. We'll catch up with you here in just a few minutes. Again, Chad Simmons, bringing the juice, man, all day long, getting the scoop that you cannot get anywhere else. I want to backtrack just a little bit to our conversation about Jaden Rashada. NIL, still fairly new, something that I think all of college football, whether it be collectives, players, coaches, everyone's trying to sort of get acclimated to appropriately. How do you think this Jaden Rashada recruitment, from flipping from Miami to Florida and then the NIL contract that was very public and now going to Arizona State where he's not getting anything promised, how do you foresee this potentially impacting the future of NIL in college football?
Well, without getting in the weeds too far on this NIL thing, now Nick Delatorre of Gators Online for us at On3 wrote an incredible breakdown on Jaden Rashada, about 2,000 words on exactly what went wrong in his recruitment and how things just expired at UF in terms of getting Jaden Rashada on campus. I think this is gonna kind of be like a case study for a lot of teams, for a lot of collectives out there. If you know what went down, this was not necessarily a Florida Gator problem as much as it was a collective issue for Rashada. And I think that, there could be more fallout from this. I don't want to get too into it, but if there's lawsuits that come from whatever went down with him and the Gator Collective, I think you're going to see this reverberate throughout college football, because a lot of these collectives in NIL collectives
Yeah.
are put together by boosters who are just regular citizens. And if this thing goes to a lawsuit, people don't want to be named in this kind of stuff. They want to just stay away. I think this is going to kind of slow down some of the ridiculousness that we saw happening with NIL, some of the promises that we've heard being made. I think that teams are going to look at what happened here and proceed with caution because of this Jaden Rashada situation.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first one that really became public, right? Like, we heard rumblings and rumors of what might be happening and different figures that were maybe true, maybe not. And now this is out. This is reported by The Athletic. Again, a great article by Nick De La Torre from Gators Online. Like, now we're all getting to peel back the curtain and take a look at what actually happened.
And there could be more. Like I said,
absolutely.
There's layers to this onion, and if a lawsuit is filed, we're going to get a lot more information on this, and it's people that really don't want to be necessarily out in the public. So I think that Jaden Rashada's recruitment, it was NIL filled when it was Miami and Florida. Now he gets to make his own decision. I'm being told by sources that there was no big NIL deal on the table. Heck, if he wanted an NIL deal, his best opportunity was probably going to be to go to TCU. But he chooses Arizona State based on those relationships and the ability to come in and make an impact.
And not to beat a dead horse, but I mean, On3, we have the NIL valuations for a reason. We're trying to set the market here. And if you look at what Jaden Rashada's NIL valuation was, right around $400,000. Josh, we're talking about like $13 million in terms of what the contract was reported by The Athletic. This was all very avoidable.
I think it was 29 times what the On3 NIL valuation was. So if the NIL valuation was stuck to at On3, maybe Jaden Rashada would still be a Florida Gator. But look, everything happens for a reason. I think I don't want to say that this was a Florida Gator issue. I think this issue would have popped up somewhere in America. I mean, I deemed Jaden Rashada the first NIL holdout when he wasn't enrolling because he was signed to the Florida Gators. He just hadn't enrolled yet. We knew it was because of an NIL, so that was our first NIL holdout. Yeah,
absolutely. And Jaden Rashada heading to Arizona State. The part that I love about this so much, Josh, gets to handle it on the field. Like, if he has a great year, he's somehow all Pac-12 this upcoming year, wins the job, like, he can all just put this behind him. It's a storyline that he learns from, and I think we all learn from across the college football landscape.
I think it becomes a footnote to his career if he goes on and plays the way that we think he can play. I don't think this is going to be held against him. I think a lot of what happened was due to adults, not necessarily Jaden Rashada himself.
Sure.
He gets to make the decision now. He's heading to Arizona State, clean slate. Best of luck to the young man.
Absolutely. If they stick to the NIL evaluation, this whole thing's avoidable. Just going to leave it at that. Another interesting recruitment that we have tracked, we actually talked about it this time last signing day, where Cormani McClain was all set to go to Miami, and then the picture went out of like the half-eaten cake with Miami colors. Eventually ends up giving his commitment to Coach Prime in Colorado. What's the latest that we're hearing on that right now, Josh? And what's your feeling on what Coach Prime could be doing today?
Let's review that a little bit. So he shocks the world by committing to Miami over the Gators. The Gators are a pipeline for Lakeland athletes. That's where Cormani goes to school, Lakeland High School. He commits to the Miami Hurricanes in October. It's quiet. It's silent. But he doesn't sign on the early signing period. He just, things get away. His mom says there will be no signing period. There will be no signing on the early period. There's not a lot of intel on what happened. He shows up at the Under Armour game, declines to do any interviews. Anytime a recruit doesn't do interviews, it just leads to more rumors. Because when he doesn't want to set the record straight, Twitter and the message boards will. And Cormani McClain was interviewed, though. He did speak during the game on the sidelines where he said that he was going to sign with Miami on January 15th. Now, anybody that follows recruiting knows that that's a weird answer because there's nothing that you can sign on January 15th. The early window is closed, and the late window doesn't open until February 1st. So him saying that he was going to sign with Miami on January 15th didn't really make sense to me. January 15th comes, no announcement, very Cormani McClain-ish. He just takes it into the next week, no announcement. He shows up in Boulder, Colorado the next weekend. A few days later, he flips his commitment to the Buffaloes, and the rest is history. I mean, Cormani Money McClain goes from Miami to Colorado. When the cycle started, I did not have that predicted.
And that's Deion Sanders, 2 signing days in a row. Landing one of the top defensive backs in the entire country in Cormani McClain. And Josh, if you're a defensive back at the high school level and Deion Sanders sits down with you and says, hey, listen, got a gold jacket in my closet, and it's not from Colorado, it's from the NFL, a Hall of Famer, the best ever, arguably, in the game, especially the defensive back position. That's a pretty enticing pitch. What else is going into this to get these premier defensive back talents to head to Boulder with it?
Well, if you're Deion Sanders and you're the greatest defensive back of all time, then you better come in and start recruiting the defensive back position like you're the greatest. And that's what he's done. Last year is Travis Hunter. He broke FSU Hearts fans when he flipped him. Now he goes back into the state of Florida because, hey, that's where all the talent is. But this time it's Miami, and now they know what it feels like to get prime-timed.
And they had a pretty big junior day as well for the 2024 kids. Coach Deion Prime, Time Sanders. What are you hearing about 2024 for Coach Prime? Because it sounds like maybe there will be a lot of work done via the portal for this first year for him. Looking at 2024, what's the buzz you're hearing right now?
In year zero, the 2023 class, that's not year one for Deion, that's year zero, because when he arrived, he only had about 24 hours before the early signing period hit, and he hosted a couple recruits, get some momentum going with the Cormani McClain, with the Dylan Edwards flipping from Notre Dame. Yeah. Now 24 is it's his time. This is where the playing field is equal. And Deion's already showing the ability to get guys on campus. Look, it's hard enough to land 5 stars in this day and age of recruiting, but to land them without a visit is impossible. Yeah. So the fact that we're seeing a Ryan Wingo go out, a Jawan Johnson make his way out there, we're seeing big-time recruits already make their way to Colorado. Today's February 1st. We're 1 year away from 2024 signing day. And Deion Sanders, I'm not saying he's going to have a top 3, top 5 class, but when he arrived to Colorado, he brought the class from about 69, 65, all the way into the 30s. I think it's very realistic to think that Deion could pull a top 15 class in 2024.
Yeah, like you said, getting the signature of a one Dylan Edwards, one of the fastest running backs in the entire 2023 cycle. Nice feather in your cap. Chad Simmons, I want to get your thoughts on this as it pertains to the Cormani McClain situation. Is there anything that you're hearing right now in the early hours of the morning as it pertains to him eventually putting that pen to paper and being signed, sealed, delivered to Boulder, Colorado?
Anything to worry about, Chad?
Yeah.
Nothing that I've heard about anything that's going away from Colorado, about not signing today. I mean, obviously he had everything set for December 21st, and then that got, scrapped kind of out of nowhere. But nothing I've heard, today, last night, leading up to this about anything going on there about him not signing with Colorado at some point today.
Good deal. Okay, so no news is good news for the good people in Boulder, Colorado. Again, Cormani McClain currently committed to Colorado, expected to sign.
How about just the excitement over Deion? He doesn't even have to land somebody for us to talk about him. He doesn't even have to land somebody for Twitter to go crazy about what Deion's doing in Colorado. There's a lot of excitement, and I can tell you what, there's going to be a ton of Colorado Buffalo talk all off season because Deion Sanders ain't going to lose a game.
It's all off season is going to be a whole lot of juice around the Colorado Buffalo football train for good reason. I mean, I've seen the Colorado team room more times than I ever have in my life, just over going viral on Twitter the last couple times this month. Well, let's talk about Alabama. Number 1 ranked class. Currently, the Tide are rolling. Doesn't look like they're doing anything today in terms of adding more signatures or adding any more personnel to their already star-studded class in 2023. But they've got 7 on 3 consensus 5-star recruits. Bama is rolling right now. Really well-rounded class. Justice Haynes out of the state of Georgia. It looked like he was going to be a Georgia guy. There was a lot of Georgia buzz throughout him the whole cycle. Ends up committing to the Tide, sticking with the Tide. Chad, it sounds like you got something, or am I off base there?
No, it looks like Walker Lyons going to USC.
Wow. Okay.
Obviously another top tight end in the country. He's ranked number 7 in the On3 consensus rankings up in Northern California, Folsom High School. Huge get for Lincoln right now. One thing to remember about Walker, a little bit different. He's going on a mission to Norway. So even though he signs today with USC and part of the 2023 class, he actually won't be on campus in LA until sometime in the 2024 class cycle. So they're still a ways away from him to get to LA and be that USC Trojan. But this one was trending towards Georgia. Georgia.
Yeah, I was going to say, is this a bit of an upset?
Yeah, I
today on
think so. I
signing
mean,
day?
USC kind of quietly snuck back in late. It looked like Georgia and Utah were battling over the last, I guess, 4 or 5 weeks. USC rumbling started again about a week and a half ago. And I was told just last night maybe Georgia was just too far away all the way across the country from Northern California to Athens, Georgia. It was going to come down to Utah and USC. And in the end, he's going to play for Lincoln Riley.
Is this, I mean, sounds like an RPM buster. Was it something where USC made a good push late or Georgia did something wrong on their end? Like, how does something like this happen on the second signing period?
No, I think, obviously with Georgia, him visiting Georgia officially for the Tennessee game weekend surprised many people. Georgia hadn't really been linked too much to Walker Lyons up until that point. Him getting to Athens, he told me straight up he was blown away seeing an SEC environment. Obviously, the tight end usage for Georgia speaks for itself. They have 2 great guys in Pierce Sperlin, Lawson Lucky, already part of this class, still trying to get Deuce Robinson to be that 3rd guy in this class as well. But again, I think distance, according to some intel I got late last night, they had a family just sit-down conversation being real. I don't think mom wanted to see her baby go after being gone to Norway, for a year and a half, to come back for a little bit, then go right back across the country to Athens, Georgia. It came down to staying closer to home, and that helped USC jump in there and beat Utah here. So I think somewhat of an upset. Even talking to a USC source this morning, there wasn't a lot of confidence in that camp that they were going to get him today. They thought maybe even Utah was trending. So he did keep people just guessing, I guess. In the end, Lincoln Riley got his guy.
Do you think that maybe the crowded tight end room, especially if Deuce Robinson ends up, there was a lot of talk about him trending towards Georgia in this past week. Do you think that maybe a crowded tight end room resulted in Walker Lyons choosing USC?
Not so much, because you got to think about, too, we're talking about Walker not coming in right now, but a year and a half from now. So even if Georgia, for instance, had a loaded, which they do, tight ends room with Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp and new guys coming in, they're still trying to add Deuce, who's more of that. And really all those guys are a little bit different. I think Georgia's obviously shown their personnel groups. They can use, 12, 13 different personnel groups to kind of get more tight ends on the field and use them in different ways. So I do not think Walker was scared away by the competition at Georgia. In the end, as a family, it sounds like they just felt like LA, USC was the best fit overall for the Lions family.
Well, here we go.
There you go.
USC could surprisingly have a big day because Roderick Pleasant also on the board.
Yep.
They just land Walker Lyons, a top 150 type player. USC, we talked about big movers in the beginning. They could be it.
Off to a hot start, a late Christmas gift for the good folks in Los Angeles. And Chad, we walked in, we said, hey, it's going to be a little bit more of a chill environment. I'm not expecting quite as much movement, probably a little bit less going on than the first signing period. And, of course, a few minutes into the show, Walker Lyons.
Here we are.
Upset alert, going to USC. Big get for the USC Trojans. Appreciate you keeping us in the know, Chad. Where were we, Josh?
We're talking about Alabama.
Talking about Bama. The Tide continue to roll. Bama doing Bama things. 7 consensus 5-star recruits for the Tide. Let's talk about some of the stories within this recruiting class, because they got Justice Haynes from Georgia. I mean, what is the biggest get from a story perspective, maybe an upset perspective, for Nick Saban flexing his muscle?
I go back to what happened on December 20th. The early signing period was December 21st, but on December 20th, Nick Saban flips Caden Proctor, 5-star offensive tackle that was committed to Iowa. Oh, and you're going to say, oh, but he's committed to Iowa. Yeah, well, guess what? He's from Iowa, and he's an offensive tackle. So this was a huge deal, and they needed him. I mean, to get him the night before signing day, I think it was huge. And it just goes to show that Nick Saban's reach goes beyond the South. It goes beyond what we think it goes. He can literally go out and get what he wants, what he needs to fill these holes on the roster. And this is a great example. Not just any offensive tackle, but the #1 offensive tackle in America.
Again, from the backyard. From
Right.
Iowa's backyard, landing Caden Proctor. How about Keon Keeley? He's expected to stay committed to Notre Dame for a long period of the cycle. And then you hear a little bit more buzz around, hey, other schools could be in play. Maybe he's going to decommit. Eventually does decommit. And where's he headed but Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where they just pretty much produce defensive line products to the NFL like it's their job. It's unbelievable.
And Alabama had a lot to overcome in this recruitment. He was the centerpiece of Notre Dame's class early on. He committed to them for a couple months, reopens his recruitment right before his senior year starts, and the rumors are flying that he's going to end up up at Florida because Tampa's only an hour and a half, 2-hour drive away from where he goes to high school. And they seem to have the inside track on him. But then when the visits start happening, when you see where he's going, it's Ohio State, it's Alabama. We didn't really see too much of Florida once he was decommitted, and we thought that maybe this is going to be, he's going to head to Ohio State where they dominate with great defensive linemen, and he chooses Bama.
I mean, Bama's ability to stick with commitments throughout this cycle, because Bama, like you said, Keon Keeley commits a little bit earlier. I mean, they had some staying power. Even Caleb Downs, the 5-star safety out of Georgia. Georgia was in the mix in his recruitment early when he did commit to Bama, and then he's at Ohio State, Michigan on like a surprise visit at the end of the year because he's trying to totally like nail down his schools essentially, or nail down his commitment to Alabama, and still, even being in that atmosphere, even being in Columbus, Ohio, Nick Saban, like you said, flexes the muscle. Bama is still gonna. Bama, really well-rounded class.
Now, there's another interesting recruitment here that we're looking at the top of their commit list is Justice Haynes.
Yeah.
One of the top running backs in the country, out of the state of Georgia. He's a Georgia legacy. This is the year that Georgia wins back-to-back national championships. Chad Simmons, were you surprised that Justice Haynes chose Alabama over Georgia?
Yes, probably still am a little bit that he actually signed there. I mean, just to be honest, I mean, obviously knowing his dad and, Georgia legacy, and grew up living, breathing, sleeping Georgia red and black. I mean, this kid was telling everybody growing up from the age 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, I want to be a Georgia Bulldog. I want to play in Sanford Stadium. I want to play between the hedges. I can tell this story now. I'll never forget when I think he committed, early July last summer, and he gave me a call probably three weeks prior to that announcement. And he told me that he was going to commit in July. He knew where he wanted to go. And we kind of started playing a little bit of a game about, hey, I got top 4, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, Ohio State. Chad, who do you think's the number 4 team? I say, okay, I'm going to go Florida. He said, right. I go number 3. I actually say Alabama. He's like, nope. I say Ohio State. Nope. I was like, that only leaves Georgia being number 3. Anyway, long story short, it came down to, at that time, Alabama versus Ohio State, not even Alabama versus Georgia. And I knew in the summer going into those OVs, it was Alabama, it was Georgia number 1, Ohio State 2, Bama 3. Those OVs changed everything. And Robert Gillespie was a big part for Alabama. His mom went to Florida. Justice's mom went to Florida. At the same time, Gillespie played at Florida. She knew him. He knew her. She trusted him. Nothing against Del McGee. Did a great job there, too, at Georgia. But end of the day, Gillespie played a big role. And I think Justice just decided, I want to make my own name. I want to become that first Haynes to be that guy running back at Alabama and not have that extra pressure of going in behind my dad at Georgia, the expectations of what it's going to be like. But this, to me, was one of the biggest wins on the recruiting trail for Alabama, where nobody, up to about 10 or 15 minutes before he announced, it started to leak out a little bit that he might go to Alabama that day on that Sunday afternoon. But I had to sit on it for about 3 weeks. And I really didn't. I made him call me like 2 more times and give me the same story about why he's picking Alabama to convince me he wasn't just messing with me on the phone. But end of the day, huge win for Nick Saban, Gillespie, the new OC, whoever that will be. They're getting a great elite player in Justice Haynes.
When he chose Alabama, did Georgia just concede? Or were they after him all the way up until signing day?
Man, if they just conceded, McGee might be fired right now. But no, they went hard until the end. I mean, that's how Kirby is. Kirby learned from Nick Saban. I mean, Nick Saban flipped multiple guys in this class from other schools. I mean, Holstein from A&M and multiple guys that he's going to recruit until the end, and Kirby Smart's going to do the same. They wanted Justice Haynes in this class. They worked up until the last time that Justice just finally said, hey, which was mid-December, I'm going to Alabama. Thanks for recruiting me. We have great relationships. I hope they stay the same. I love you guys. You guys love me, but I'm going to Alabama. But there was some confidence there in Athens at Georgia, November, early December, thinking they could potentially flip Justice Haynes and get him to Athens. But I don't think he ever truly considered going away from Alabama.
Chad, Justice Haynes making you work for it there. Saying,
that was a great
my
story,
top 2, they're going to be in 3. I mean, that's a phenomenal inside look at your day-to-day when it comes to life on the recruiting trail. Well, Chad, we appreciate it very much. Appreciate you dropping some knowledge. Again, I'm sure we will talk throughout the duration of this show as more movement occurs here. Again, Nicholas Harbor set to commit here in just about 20 minutes. Before we talk more about some other teams in the SEC, the Georgia Bulldogs, back-to-back champions, Georgia Bulldogs. Let's take a look at the movement. USC jumping Penn State, going all the way to 13 are the USC Trojans right now. So we told you there'd be some movement on the back end here. Maybe not so much in the top 10 right now, but 11 through 20. Josh, your thoughts on USC?
We said there's going to be no movement in the top 10, but if USC lands top 100 prospect Roderick Pleasant and can maybe pull, I don't know where they would pull another surprise from, maybe a Deuce Robinson down the road, you could see USC crack the top 10. That would be a complete shocker.
Absolutely unbelievable.
And we're not going to get the answer today because Deuce Robinson, if you're just joining the show, Chad Simmons reported last night that Deuce Robinson is not going to sign today. We don't know exactly when he's going to sign, but it's down between USC, Texas, and Georgia, and we're just talking about USC. So if USC could pull him, along with the Roderick Pleasant, I mean, we could be looking at a whole new top 10. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself now, but it's exciting, JD.
Very, very exciting. And we know what else is exciting? That offense at USC. Playing with Caleb Williams. I guess Walker Lyons won't play with Caleb Williams. But, I mean, if you're Deuce Robinson, you want to flex out, catch some passes from 13, not a bad spot to be in. Like I said, though, another school in the mix for Deuce Robinson, the Georgia Bulldogs, back-to-back national champions. They're at number 2 currently in the rankings. Josh, just your thoughts overall on Georgia and where they stand today? Probably not making any more moves, as it sounds like, with Deuce Robinson not committing today and Walker Lyons now going to USC. Your thoughts on the Bulldogs, number 2?
I think the hay's in the barn for them, like you said. And Georgia fans, don't feel bad that you're sitting at number 2. Don't feel bad at all. This is an unbelievable class, even by Georgia standards. Look at Damon Wilson, Jordan Hall, Raylan Wilson, no relation to Damon Wilson, and offensive tackle Monroe Freeling are the 5-star talents that they're bringing in here. Damon Wilson's recruitment was kind of crazy down to the wire. Chad, why don't you chime in on Damon Wilson? I mean, he had some big-time suitors, including Ohio State. How were the Georgia Bulldogs able to pull one of the top pass rushers out of the state of Florida and get him signed, sealed, and delivered?
Yeah, Josh, this was one of the biggest, I think, wins for Georgia and Kirby Smart on the recruiting trail. Coach DeRibe did a great job just establishing that relationship with the star out of Venice, Florida. I saw that kid play multiple times the last couple of years, and I can say that kid truly has that dog in him. I think that's what sets him apart. To me, he's built to play in the SEC. Nothing against like Ohio State or anybody else, but just you look at him, the way he plays the game, nice kid, quiet kid off the field. He literally flips that switch. He wants to hurt the guy in front of him. He wants to hurt the quarterback in the backfield, and he's going to fit in just right. And Kirby Smart, Will Muschamp, Glenn Schumann, all their defense there in Athens. But it was a huge win. We thought after the OV to Ohio State early in the season, the buzz was around the Buckeyes. At one time, it looked like Ohio State, maybe in Alabama. Georgia took Bama's spot. They got him on campus during the season. It became a roller coaster at the time. Alabama was kind of fading. It was Georgia, Ohio State, Georgia. In the end, it literally went back and forth. They had those final in-home visits in December and got it done and figured things out pretty quickly, and it became Georgia. Just because the fit. Damon thinks he fits in well in Georgia's defensive scheme. He can show his versatility, stand up, put his hand down, drop in the flats. He really likes how Georgia right now is developing players just like him, and I'd be shocked if he's not getting minutes and snaps in the fall for Georgia.
Yeah, and that was a big win because even Miami, who was out there and they were sniping some 5-stars left and right, even though they didn't even make a bowl this year. But Miami was knocking on the door, trying to get in that recruitment, and they were just unable to because Damon Wilson was locked in on Ohio State and Georgia. Huge win for the Dogs. Also, tell me about Jordan Hall. He's a newly minted 5-star at On3. You've got to see him play as well. He had a big-time recruitment. It was UF, Georgia, and Alabama down the stretch for him.
Well, it all started for Jordan Hall with Georgia a summer ago in 2021. They got him on campus for camp. He blew them away. They offered him on the spot, and that was before things even got going. Nobody knew who Jordan Hall from Westside High School in Jacksonville, Florida was at the time. I go down to see Jordan Hall for the first time working over here at On3, and I think he's a coach. The guy looks about 35 years old. He's got a Westside football T-shirt on. If he would have had a whistle around his neck, he would have been a coach. I mean, he's a guy that looks older than what he is, and he's very mature beyond his years, has that deep voice. He's a grown man playing playing high school football. And I can say this with confidence. Georgia had him on their board as one of the top overall players in America. So I think his ranking for Charles Power and on 3 really matches up for how high Georgia is on Jordan Hall. Super athlete. Another guy I think could see meaningful minutes as a true freshman at the University of Georgia. One thing we know about Kirby Smart, they're going to play a lot of players. And if you earn your playing time and you show you can play in the SEC, they will play you if you're a freshman, sophomore, junior, or senior. I think there's pretty high expectations for Hall. He can be that next dude in the middle for Trey Scott.
And Chad, while it might be done in 2023 today, 2024 is already starting to get rolling. We're going to get a commitment from Ellis Robinson today, the #1 corner in the country. Right now, the RPM is trending 64, 65% Bulldogs. Where do you think Georgia stands today with that 2024 prospect?
Yeah, I like where Georgia sits right now, JD. I mean, they've been, I think, trending for much of the fall. I think Alabama had an edge at one time, maybe late summer. Georgia was looking good early in the summer. He took trips to both schools. He's been back to Georgia in January. That's the only junior day he took in this month. Then he announces his commitment date. That always seems to line up pretty good for that last school he visited. Again, I think they've done a great job there with Fran Brown, Will Muschamp, Kirby Smart, all heavily involved. He's still a major target for Bama. Has had conversations with Travaris Robinson, the DB coach, name is T-Rob, over in Tuscaloosa. But right now, a decision coming in just a couple of hours. I still like where Georgia sits right now for 5-star cornerback Ellis Robinson.
Yeah, that's a big one coming in at the end of the show. Ellis Robinson giving out his pledge to one lucky school, but the Georgia Bulldogs sitting in good position. Now, Josh, something interesting about this 2023 class for the Dogs, no quarterback.
Yeah,
no quarterback.
what's
What's the thought process behind that? Is that concerning? You still have a stacked room with Carson Beck and Brock Vandagriff and Gunnar Stockton. I mean, what's the thought process behind no quarterback having pen meet paper for the Dogs?
Well, JD, they just won back-to-back national championships with a walk-on QB, so maybe this is the new strategy. No, just
not about what
I would almost think that is the strategy. However, the Dogs are in great position. We'll throw it to Chad on this one in a second, but the Dogs are in a great position with the #1 overall player, the #1 quarterback in the 2024 class, Dylan Raiola. So they pass on taking one in 2023, but Chad, how does 2024 set up for the Georgia Bulldogs and their quarterback target?
Yeah, I think obviously Dylan Raiola is the hot name. He's #1 player in America, the only 5-star plus prospect in the country right now for 2024. And obviously coming off a visit to USC, there's some buzz around the Trojans, but
it ain't going to be easy.
Georgia was the first school to offer him. He's had a lot of love and affection for the University of Georgia. Obviously, he loves Todd Monken. Of course, he's watching what happens there as well with Monken. Does he stay in Athens as the OC? Does he take an NFL job if offered the right one? That's still to be determined. I don't think Raiola decides anytime soon, but it looks like Georgia, Nebraska, and USC are the main 3 to watch with Raiola, with I think visits coming back to Georgia on March 18th and Nebraska March 25th when we get back in things opening back up in the spring. But let's don't forget about Ryan Puglisi, who's also committed to Georgia right now, who's a top 40 prospect for Charles Power and us at the On3 team, who in his own right is one of the top quarterbacks in the country. He camped at Alabama and Georgia last summer, was offered by both schools on the spot. I went to watch him play a great Loomis Chaffee team in Connecticut earlier this fall. His team fell, but he definitely flashed why Georgia likes him. Super athlete, plays baseball, strong arm quarterback, good mobility. And I can tell you this, Monken's high on him just like he is Dylan Raiola.
I don't know. Maybe they can convince those guys to walk on.
Yeah, that's the special sauce, man, right? You just want to be a walk-on quarterback, win back-to-back national titles, all is well that ends well. Chad, before we get you out of here, or I guess let you work the phones a little bit more, right now for Georgia, being behind Alabama, is this something where, hey, we've won back-to-back national titles? Josh, you told me before, recruiting kind of lags a little bit, and you see that bump going forward. How much concern should Georgia fans have being in the #2 spot? I mean, being the #2 spot in the country for the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings, pretty coveted spot, but you're still behind Bama. What's the thought process there for Georgia fans in your mind?
I mean, obviously, Kirby doesn't want to be behind Bama or Nick Saban for anything, even if it is on paper or on the internet about team. I can tell you that Kirby Smart's as big of a competitor from the biggest thing to the smallest thing. He wants to be on top. But in reality, just to address your question, should there be concern? Absolutely not. It's like Josh Newberg said earlier, they're signing another epic class in 2023. In a normal year, when Bama's not signing, it seems like a dozen 5-stars, they're number one by a mile. But right now, Bama's still Bama. Bama has set the standard, and Georgia's definitely closed that gap and become one of those schools as well that's now won back-to-back national championships. But again, Georgia, under Kirby Smart, you're going to recruit at an elite level. And again, Georgia finds guys they feel can play for them and fill holes for them. It may not be the same across the board because of their defensive scheme, what they want to do offensively. So it may not be the number one player here or there, but they're going to get their 5-star guys they feel that can flourish in their schemes. And again, Georgia fans, the Georgia Bulldogs should have zero concern about their recruiting class now or in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, it's like Porsche and Lamborghini, right? Like, are you really complaining about either one? Probably not.
Georgia currently sits second in the 2024 rankings, and I know we're a year out, but if Ellis Robinson were to pick Georgia here in about an hour, Georgia will jump Alabama and be number one to start the cycle in 2024. I know the cycle's already started, but the 1-year mark, Georgia will enter. If they land Ellis Robinson is the number one team in 2024. So we'll see how it shakes out, but I think it's going to be another Alabama-Georgia battle. Once again, I mean, 2023 was great, but 2024 could be even more intense.
I mean, how awesome is this? We're living in an era of college football. We'll talk about this in years to come. And we'll tell our kids, like, hey, Saban and Kirby Smart went toe-to-toe on the field, went toe-to-toe on the recruiting trail. It's a beautiful thing. I think it's a historical era within college football that we're living in right now. Shifting gears a little bit, the Texas Longhorns coming in currently the number 3 class in the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings. They are no strangers to recruiting well in Austin. And the guys like Arch Manning, Jonte Cook, Cedric Baxter, I mean, they got a ton of ballers headed to Austin. Why is this class, in your mind, potentially different than the other star-studded classes they've had in Austin?
Because they have a Manning signed.
It's true.
Nobody else in the country signed a Manning. And that really is the difference in this class. And it takes shape in different ways. One, he's a talent. Not only just a talent, but potentially a generational type talent. He broke all of his uncle's records in high school, and he takes his talents to Texas, and he was one of the biggest recruiting bell cows of that class. Days after his commitment comes Jonte Cook, the wide receiver. After that, they pick up like 3 or 4 offensive linemen. This was the Arch Manning effect. You get somebody in there like an Arch Manning who can become the centerpiece of your class and watch the rest all just fill through. Cedric Baxter, the number 1 running back on 3, they pull him out of the state of Florida, a one-time Florida State commitment, going to Austin, Texas. He's a guy that I think can come in and play right away, a bigger bruising back with home run speed. Love this Texas class. Anthony Hill was a one-time number 1 linebacker in America. Now he's ranked number 2 linebacker in America, still an elite player. They're just bringing him in. You got Malik Muhammad. They flipped Colton Vasek from Oklahoma. He's an edge rusher. This Texas class, it brings also with it some expectations.
Sure.
And Steve Sarkisian, it's entering year 3. It's no longer the honeymoon period. So what do you think Steve Sarkisian's thinking when he's bringing in a top 3 class? Now, does he need to win big this year?
Yeah, I think it has to be. I think for 2023, you don't expect to see Arch Manning on the field, and if you do see Arch Manning on the field, it's because something probably went wrong. So 2023, to me, on the field has to be a return on investment kind of year, because Texas has recruited well for a long time. They put so much into it from a resource perspective, whether it be facilities and NIL opportunities for their athletes. Like, there is so much being put into Texas. Now it's a time of, okay, we've gone through the 5-7 year. We saw progress last year. In 2023, let's do something. We don't need to win the Big 12 title. I think that's maybe a little bit too lofty, but heck, let's play for it. Let's be in the mix. Let's be in that game, right? I mean, hey, I want to tread lightly there in Austin, but let's be in the game at least. And I think he'll get at least 2 more years if things don't go the way you want them to this year because of this class and having Arch Manning there.
I was going to say, do you think Arch Manning kind of gives him that lifeline?
Absolutely.
Because he is the future. So regardless of what they do, of course they can't go out there and flop this year.
Right.
They got to win, and they got to win in bunches. But does Arch Manning kind of extend the shelf life of Steve Sarkisian at Texas?
I think it has to. I think it absolutely has to, because in the day and age of recruiting and NIL and different things that are going on, transfer portal, I mean,
Steve Sarkisian recruited him.
People commit to people, right? I mean, the Arch Manning sweepstakes that went on was not just an Arch Manning, an 18-year-old, making a decision, while I'm sure at the end of the day it was his final decision. His uncles were involved. I mean, his dad was involved, Cooper Manning. I mean, there was a lot of other counsel he was getting when he made this decision to sign up and be a Longhorn, and a lot of that to me was centered around development. Like you talk about, you go to college to eventually excel at whatever your professional field is going to be. Arch Manning, aspirations obviously to be an NFL quarterback, and who better to groom him than Steve Sarkisian. So if Steve Sarkisian, for whatever reason, is no longer the head coach in Austin, Texas, you should have a little bit of pause if you're someone within the Texas bubble and saying, okay, well, are we risk losing Arch? I mean, that would be a very real thought, I believe.
Yeah.
But again, Arch
had an interesting recruitment. I want to talk to Chad about this. He's a phenomenal talent. There's no question about that. But he didn't do the camp combine circuit like we see, especially a lot of quarterbacks. I mean, we see these quarterbacks do this Elite 11 thing from their sophomore year to their senior year. We see him hit the combines. We see him hit the camps. Chad, were you a little bit surprised by Arch Manning's approach to these off-season events?
Not really, because the last name. I mean, he lives somewhat, I think, in a bubble. I mean, he went to the school his father played. You know, Peyton went to. I mean, Newman High School, downtown New Orleans. I mean, nothing against Elite 11 or the camp circuit, but when you're working with those guys, you're working with Peyton Manning, you're working with Archie Manning, you're working with Eli Manning in your backyard on QB drills. Hard to argue against that philosophy. I mean, obviously, you love to see him go out there and compete, have fun as a young student athlete, like other quarterbacks and other national, recruits out there, and kind of live that life. But I think from all I get, I mean, he liked where he was at. He wanted to hang with his guys in New Orleans. I mean, he was a loyal teammate at Newman High School, and now he is what he is, one of the top players in this 2023 cycle, headed to play for Sark at Texas.
Love the way he did it.
Love the way he did it. Kept it very much so under wraps, kept it close to the vest, did Arch Manning, and now he is headed to be a Texas Longhorn, along with a lot of other big-time ballers that are headed and taking their talents to Austin. A lot of 5 stars, Josh.
A lot of five stars and 2 number 1 players at their position. This is a infusion of talent. This class right here, when we look back at Steve Sarkisian, this is going to be a make or break class. How this class fares is going to determine his future at Texas.
Well, speaking of 5 stars, you and I sat down earlier this week.
Yeah, we did.
To chop it up a little bit about the On3 consensus 5 stars. So
what a group.
Without further ado, we'll show you that clip and enjoy. So the On3 consensus rankings are now out and available to the public. I want to focus on these 5 stars, though. We got 32 of them. Josh, before we take a look at that list, why don't you break down for the people at home the difference between the in-house rankings and then the consensus rankings that we're going to jump into?
Yeah, our in-house rankings are done by Charles Power, Director of Scouting and Rankings here at On3. But the consensus actually take into account all 4 recruiting services: Rivals, 24/7, ESPN, and On3. And it gives fans a way to look at an unbiased ranking system where you don't have to worry about, hey, what service is ranking who? All 4 in one, the On3 consensus.
Beautiful. Best of all worlds. So let's take a look at those rankings. You got 32 through 17 on your screen here. Josh, which of these players jumps out to you here from the 32 to 17 range?
Yeah, Raylan Wilson in there at number 29. Linebacker, headed to Georgia, signee. He is a sideline-to-sideline hitter, fills up the stat sheet with tackles, everything you want in a modern-day linebacker. Raylan Wilson, headed to Georgia. And then you also got to look, there's 2 unsigned, uncommitted prospects on here in Deuce Robinson, the number 1 tight end in the nation, coming in at number 23. And at 21, the number 1 athlete in the nation, Nicholas Harbor, both heading into signing day, uncommitted, unsigned. Also want to stop at number 17 and take a look at offensive tackle Samson Okunlola. 6'7", 310 pounds. He's headed to Miami where they need him desperately. Samson Okunlola has what it takes to go in there and compete for a starting job in day 1 for the Miami Hurricanes.
Pancake Hunch, like you said, the Miami Hurricanes, they need some help on the O-line. Let's go ahead and take another look here at 16 through 1. Josh, I'm looking at this list. Number 4 on the rankings right here, the consensus 5-star rankings, Zachariah Branch, wide receiver, headed to Los Angeles. Was a baller for Bishop Gorman this last year. Our pro comp for him is Jalen Waddle, and he's an absolute stud. I mean, just your prototypical slot receiver, can help you in the pass game, can help you in the return game. I expect him to see the field somewhat early for the USC Trojans. But of this list, 16 through 1, who else are you looking at?
Oh, how can we forget Peyton Bowen, the 5-star safety that signed with Oklahoma but was committed to Notre Dame for much of his recruitment. On the early signing period, he flips to Oregon. But, JD, he doesn't actually sign with Oregon on that Wednesday. He waits the next day and ends up signing with OU, so they get their 5-star safety a day after the early signing period, but they get him nonetheless. Love Francis Malagoa, going to team up with Samson Okunloa down there at Miami. Both of them could end up on the starting offensive line in 2023. Malachi Nelson going to team up with Zachariah Branch on the next level again. Love that they're headed to USC. And then how can we forget about all the Alabama players that we see on here? Keon Keeley, arguably maybe the best player in the country. I know Arch Manning is in the number 1 spot, but boy, Keon Keeley can play.
I mean, you said it. A lot of Alabama players on the On3 consensus in terms of 5 stars. I believe we got 7 of them.
Yeah.
So the Crimson Tide, the rich just continue to get richer. Nick Saban, stacking talent. What does it mean for Bama to have so many 5 stars in the On3 consensus coming to Tuscaloosa?
Well, it's an answer, right? In the year that everybody said Nick Saban maybe lost a step, look at what he does. 7 5-star recruits, but not just any 5 stars. Players at positions of needs. They load up in the trenches. They get linebacker. They get a safety. They get guys that they need to come in and play right away. Speaking of playing right away, JD, if you're a fan of one of these teams that signed any of these 32 5-stars, what's the expectation on these high-level prospects when they get on campus?
I think the expectation is early return on investment. I mean, you go and you work so hard to recruit these kids and eventually get them to put pen to paper, and then when they get on campus, it's, all right, you're one of the best players in the country, one of the top 32 according to any service that you ask. We expect you to contribute for us. I think, like you said, Peyton Bowen's going to help you in the return game or on defense or somewhere else on special teams for Oklahoma. Zachariah Branch, I fully expect to be a guy that makes an impact at USC in that offense of Lincoln Riley. So I think in terms of just expectation, it's either in your first or second year, we see you on the field sooner rather than later. So without a doubt, tons of talent within that top 32. I appreciate you breaking it all down for us.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, let's get back to signing day coverage. Folks, appreciate you rocking with us. Subscribe if you haven't already. We're going to keep on going with our national signing day coverage. A lot of big-time players.
Yeah.
A lot of 5 stars on that list.
All
Again,
across the country.
On3 consensus 5 stars. So removing any other influence that could potentially be involved there. The most complete grading system, if you will, in the entire industry.
It takes into account ESPN 24/7, On3. Who am I forgetting?
Rivals.
Yep. How could I forget them? And it takes it into account, and it removes all bias. So if fans are looking for just where all these guys are ranked, a perfect way to do it is look at the On3 consensus.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of big-time players. I mean, Peyton Bowen, dude, he's going to be one of the, I think, impact freshmen, especially down there at Oklahoma. So
Absolutely.
A lot of
One
players.
way or another, he's going to find himself on the football field for the Sooners.
Special team, running out on kickoff, playing defense. Like, you will know about Peyton Bowen. You'll know about Zachariah Branch. Again, a lot of players. The future of college football you just saw on that list. Another player that is going to be the future of whatever program he ends up at here. We're going to get a decision here in just a minute. Nicholas Harbor. Chad, I want to throw it to you here really quick. Nicholas Harbor, Oregon, South Carolina, USC, Michigan, all vying for his services. Maryland. I mean, what are you hearing right now as we're a few minutes, it sounds like, from a commitment?
Yeah, still hearing a lot of the same. That is pretty much Oregon and South Carolina still have been in communication with the Harbor camp. I mean, he's got a huge support group around him, from his family to the marketing group to his representation around the DC DMV area. But right now, a little bit of buzz has shifted more towards South Carolina, where around this time a day ago it was. But in between, it was going towards Oregon, it seemed like, late last night, very early this morning. But I'm hearing a little bit more. Still working the phone right now, texting guys right now. But from what I've heard, neither school has been told yes or no yet. But there's a little bit more confidence right now going in South Carolina than there is in Oregon.
Did both teams do in-home visits? Who did in-home visits with Nicholas Harbor the last weekend? The last week,
Yeah,
I
the
should
last
say.
week. So let me remind myself. So the last Monday was Dan Lanning and the Oregon staff. On Tuesday was Michigan. Then on Wednesday, he did South Carolina, Maryland, and Miami all in one day.
Oof.
Then he left on Friday for Oregon. The last in-home was South Carolina, Shane Beamer, Sterling Lucas, Jody Wright. That South Carolina staff got the final in-home. And there's been more confidence around South Carolina and just that consistency. Again, going back to the relationships in the Harbor camp based on what I've heard over the last 4, 5, 6 days. Oregon's come on strong. They came in late, and there's been buzz back and forth, at least making the final 2. Will he be a Duck? Will he be a Gamecock? We should know here fairly soon.
Man, we'll see if that last South Carolina face-to-face pays off in that final impact talk, that conversation. We're going to find out here momentarily where Nicholas Harbor is going, but there's really not a more freakish athlete out there than Nicholas Harbor, and it's shaping up to be one of those classic signing day battles where 24 to 48 hours you're just hearing it's this team, then it's this team, now it's this team. We'll find out, South Carolina or Oregon.
That's the fascinating thing about it. We're this close to a commitment, and there's nothing really where either team feels like they're the runaway favorite. Like Chad was saying before when we got in here, nobody's heard a yes, I'm coming.
Right.
Nobody's heard a hey, Nicholas Harbor, I'm going to be there tomorrow morning or whatever it ends up being. Also, a lot of meals being prepped within the Harbor household. 3 visits on one day.
What are you cooking? You just making a buffet, and all the coaches just come in and make a plate and sit down? I mean, how do you feed 3 coaching staffs in one day?
At some point, you go drive-through, right? Like my commitment, my recruitment was nothing
you
like
just
Nicholas
get a bucket of
Harbor's.
chicken.
I mean, we did Chick-fil-A. We brought Chick-fil-A in-house for Cornell and Brown, and that was kind of how we got down because it was like my mom was like, we're not making, and it was 2 visits. So I was like, we're not making meals for these 2 different coaching staffs. We're doing Chick-fil-A, and that's how we're doing it. But do not envy the Harbor household for how they have to go about that. When it comes to South Carolina having that last in-home visit, though, I have a very difficult time believing that Shane Beamer, leaving the final impression, wouldn't have some sort of major impact on his recruitment.
Yeah,
His charisma.
The passion.
Yeah.
The passion that he has for his players and his program. I don't want to say it's unmatched because there's a lot of passionate coaches out there, but Shane Beamer has really done a good job of endearing himself to the South Carolina program, to the fans, and now to the recruits. I mean, we're seeing potentially Shane Beamer landing his first 5-star of the cycle. Oregon needs a 5-star. South Carolina needs a 5-star. They are duking it out to the finish line here.
And they were hot to end the year. I mean, in terms of an impression you can make on recruits, beating Tennessee, ruining their playoff hopes, beating Clemson, ruining their playoff hopes. I mean, South Carolina ended the year just about as hot as anybody leading into the bowl game. I believe at last check they were right around a 46% blue chip ratio. So they're inching closer and closer to breaking that 50% threshold, which typically equates to success on the field. I mean, you get big-time players, it ends up being a good thing for you.
And you got to. I mean, look at what some of these other SEC programs are doing. It's an arms race right now. And if you're South Carolina, you can't afford to fall behind. You have your quarterback in Spencer Rattler. You might as well utilize him as a recruiting piece, and that's what they're doing right now. We'll see. I mean, it's a big recruitment, and they need a 5-star in this class.
And Nicholas Harbor, I mean, wherever he ends up going, it's hard to imagine that he stays off the field his first year. Am I wrong in assuming that? Whether he's playing tight end, whether he's playing edge, like he's got to play.
You got to get him reps. You got to get him on the field. And we're going to go to Chad Simmons to talk about reps. Let's see what Chad Simmons has to tell us.
Right about now, Shane Beamer's putting those shades on, doing a little TikTok dance. He just landed 5-star athlete, #1 player in the DMV. Nicholas Harbor, they beat out and held off Oregon, beat out Michigan, beat out Miami, beat out local program Maryland. Huge win from Curtis Fry, the track coach, to Shane Beamer, the football coach, Jody Wright, Sterling Lucas, numerous assistants, the recruits that recruited him to join him in Columbia, to the players he's gotten to know, to just his comfortability. And again, we talked about Jaden Rashada, going back to relationships with Kenny Dillingham. This time again, relationships still matter. I think that's why South Carolina beat out Oregon, maybe the bigger, better brand from a Nike standpoint on the track side. But again, Nicholas Harbor felt comfortable with Beamer, with Fry, that staff in Columbia, and he's now officially a South Carolina Gamecock.
And we talked about a potential shakeup in the lower top 20. South Carolina, prior to this commitment, sat at number 17. We got the On3 algorithms running right now.
Yeah,
and we're going to get an updated top 20 for you. But South Carolina is going to move up now.
I mean, that's a boom. That's an enormous get for Shane Beamer and company. Chad, going into him having the final home visit, we were just talking about it as the news broke that Nicholas Harber's taken his talents to Columbia, South Carolina. Was that kind of the deal sealer, if you will? Was having Shane Beamer get the last face-to-face what made it for the Gamecocks?
I mean, Beamer would probably like to hope so, just to kind of put, the bow on it per se. I mean, he's worked hard, not since he took the job, not just the last couple of months, not just this last year, but he and his staff have put in the time, the effort. And I was talking to Nick's dad, 24 hours ago, and he talked about what's going to be key in this is who connected to Nicholas on his level, who made him feel like they can talk to him at any time about anything, not even just from a coach to a student athlete, but just Nick to Shane Beamer. Who does he feel good around, comfortable around to excel in the classroom, on the track, on the football field? And I think you see that play out today, who he felt best around. I said that leading into this. Would it come down to relationships or that brand and marketing of Nike at Oregon? In the end, it came down to maybe who Nicholas Harber felt best about around surrounding himself with. Now, don't get me wrong. The NIL factored into it. South Carolina, they probably have a great deal in place for him also. But I think what trumped that was the relationships and the connections he had with the people in Columbia.
Big win for South Carolina, but a big win for South Carolina means it's a big loss for some other programs. And now, Chad, I want to get your opinion on this. I think this was a big loss for Michigan. About 2-3 months ago, as Michigan's making their run to the college football playoffs, I'm thinking, you know what makes sense? Nicholas Harber to Michigan. Michigan is down there at about number 20. They don't have a 5-star, but they've been a playoff team in back-to-back years. You got to think at some point they were going to capitalize on that momentum, but in the end, Michigan comes up empty-handed. You agree or disagree with me that this was a big loss for the Wolverines, or was it for another team?
No, I think it's a big loss probably on paper, just kind of being perceived a big loss for Michigan because they were viewed as the front runner, for multiple months during the season. They were there a couple of times. They have family in the Michigan area. The mom has always praised Michigan as an academic institution, one of the top public schools academically. And then, of course, Nick felt good about the program as well. So, obviously, anytime a 5-star like Nicholas Harber names that school as far as high interest, one of those schools people think on the outside could be trending and leading the way. But it seemed like down the stretch over the last few weeks, Michigan has slowly kind of faded in this race, and it became more of a 3-team race instead of a 5-team race, and Michigan wasn't one of those 3 schools. So even when they went in for their in-home last week, most of those schools, I think all of them, went by the school, Archbishop Carroll first in the DMV, and then to the home of Nicholas Harber. Michigan, from what I'm told, was the only school not to go by the school to check on Nick, sit in with head coach Robert Harris, pick his brain. Do you have any questions for me? How you feeling? They went just straight to the house. So did they feel like they were already on the outside looking in and didn't want to put in that full effort that last week? Or was that pretty telling? It could have been. But it seems like definitely Michigan faded pretty quickly here late.
Wow.
And playing offense, it sounds like, was a big deal for him, as you mentioned earlier in the show. Wanted to keep the body lean, stay aerodynamic so he can still run that sub-10-3 on the track. Is that sort of the buzz right now, that this is going to be a decision where he goes there and plays offense, or same thing of, hey, man, get the Ferrari in the garage. It doesn't matter how you get it there. It doesn't matter what you're playing. Just park here. We'll take care of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, speaking of like Michigan, Carolina's pitch to him, could he be that bigger version of Charles Woodson? Could you play, offensive, though, the majority of the time, playing tight end, big flex out, wide receiver? I talked to his head coach this week. He called him the next Megatron. Calvin Johnson, a big body like that, 6'4", 6'5", 230 pounds, can run, has great body control. Now, does he have the route running skills, the twitch, even the ball skills of a Calvin Johnson? Probably not. But I think the plan right now at Carolina is to go focus on offense first. But could he get 5, 6, 7, 8 snaps on 3rd and longs, go turn it loose, get the quarterback off the edge? That's been discussed as well. But I think primarily offense first under Jody Wright at South Carolina, and track, and maybe over time sprinkling a little bit of pass rush as well.
Yeah, I think Nicholas Harbor fits the same mold that Jaheim Bell. Jaheim Bell transferred out, but he was a productive young player for them and kind of used the H-back, the tight end role, and I think Nicholas Harbor could do that as well on offense right away for South Carolina.
I mean, heck, he was playing running back for them.
Right.
I mean, they had a thin running back room. They said, okay, hand it to Jaheim Bell, and then Deebo Samuel, see what he's doing in the NFL now. Obviously, a South Carolina product guy that's played all over the field. But let's talk about Oregon for a second here, Chad. This is not a huge, I don't want to understate the loss of this for them, but they've still done really well in the recruiting trail. What was it about Oregon that kept them on the outside looking in? Was it about Oregon or was it about South Carolina being the fit?
Yeah, probably a combination of both. I think one thing I learned just over the last few days trying to dive and get as much intel as possible is it's obvious, D.C. is across the country from Eugene, Oregon. Do they want to fly that much? Can they fly that much? How many games can the family get to? One thing, I know very well is that family is extremely tight. The mom, the dad, the sister, and of course Nick. Those people, they're one. They're a true Harbor family. And one thing, the mom did not make that trip to Oregon. And that gave me a little bit of hesitation about even predicting Oregon or leaning that way as I wrote out the intel the last couple of days, because I know how important the mom is in this. Again, end of the day, they made it clear it was Nick's final decision, but he was going to hear mom, he was going to hear dad, he was going to hear the people around him to help make that right decision. The mom didn't go make that trip. That told me a lot because she wants to make sure her son is taken care of, in good hands. Not that she didn't know Dan Lanning, not that she didn't know Junior Adams, not that she didn't know that staff, Tosh LaPoy, but she didn't see the living surrounding area. She didn't see the track and field set up. She didn't learn about the academic presentation at Oregon the same way she had at Michigan, South Carolina, and Maryland. So I think the distance factor and I think the relationship factor in the end hurt Oregon and helped South Carolina because, again, they came in extremely late. This time a month ago, Oregon wasn't on his radar. Here we are early in January. I'm going to take an OV to Oregon. Never been there. Coaches haven't come in to see him. He takes one visit. They make the final two, but they don't get the number one spot. That goes to South Carolina.
Big time get for South Carolina.
Yeah, and they move up a spot. So we got action, we got movement, we promised that there would be some changes. South Carolina goes from 17 to 16. Texas A&M sitting there at 15, Penn State at 14. So South Carolina on the move today with the addition of five-star athlete Nicholas Harbor. But you got to feel for Oregon and Dan Lanning, right?
Got to.
Dan Lanning reminds me of a prize fighter that's been through 12 brutal rounds. Now, I'm not saying he's been getting his butt kicked for those 12 rounds. He's been doing well. They pull a Mateo Uiagalelei. They flip Austin Novosad. But they also get a few blows dealt to them. They get five-star QB Dante Moore flips to UCLA. They thought they had another five-star in Peyton Bowen. Yeah. They had him committed for 24 hours until he ends up signing with the Oklahoma Sooners. So Dan Lanning, hey, you got to give him credit for duking it out, but kind of coming up short a little bit here at the end. Still a top 10 class, though, for the Ducks. A great class for the Ducks. I'm not trying to take a slight at them.
Sure.
I'm just trying to say that Dan Lanning is up for a fight.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone more than his fair share of rounds this recruiting cycle, and a guy who just got to Eugene from Georgia and now taking over his first head coaching position.
And he's not done. He's still duking it out for the top uncommitted cornerback in Roderick Pleasant. We're going to find out where he goes, but it's down between USC and the Oregon Ducks for Roderick Pleasant. Dan Lanning just putting the Dukes up, ready to go.
I mean, hey, I hope we get to see him smoke another cigar today. I hope we get to see another one of those viral clips that we saw last signing day. Because last signing day, Josh, I believe they were outside the top 10. Yeah. And then we got the Austin Novosad flipping, like you said. And then more smoke came with Mateo Uiagalelei. And so, I mean, Oregon, they've really been one of the late risers here in this recruiting cycle. Obviously, never a good thing to miss out on a freak show like Nicholas Harbor, but still a ton to be excited about for Eugene. What does this kind of class say about Dan Lanning and the direction of his program?
I think it shows that he has that SEC mentality that Chad was talking about when it came to Kirby Smart and Nick Saban. He's cut from that cloth. He knows how to recruit. He's not going to be one of these sleepy Pac-12 recruiters that, kind of dabbles here and there and doesn't do a lot of these in-home visits. Dan Lanning's going to do what Oregon needs. He's going to recruit nationally. He's going to go toe-to-toe with some of the biggest programs in America, and he's going to bring in the talent to rebuild, well, not necessarily rebuild, but
revamp.
Yeah, to revamp Oregon and get them where they need to be going.
I mean, Oregon, you look at what's leaving the Pac-12 with USC and UCLA heading to the Big Ten here in the not-too-distant future. Oregon has a chance, I think, to take over at least that number 1, number 2 spot with them and Utah going back-to-back. I mean, they have a real chance to be one of those consistent playoff teams when we go to 12.
Yeah, and UCLA and USC, they're on the rise as well. And then you can't forget about Colorado being there. We saw Kenny Dillingham just land Jaden Rashada. So the Pac-12 is getting really interesting when it comes to recruiting.
And the interesting thing about this class, Josh, I was looking at it this morning. If they land Roderick Pleasant, they will have 30 individuals in this 2023 cycle, which is a pretty good number when it comes to volume. Is that saying anything to you about what Dan Lanning's trying to do from a roster standpoint in Oregon to land 30 guys in your 2023 cycle where other schools are right around 25, 24? I mean, that's a big deal.
He's doing a great job of selling recruits that you're my guy. And that's a great move for somebody that's new to a program. You can convince these recruits that, like, hey, I know we got this roster here, but I wasn't here for that. I didn't recruit these guys. I recruited you, and you are my guy. And I think that's what he's getting. That's kind of the theme of this class. He's getting these guys in that are his guys. And, recruits like to hear that. They like to think that, oh, this is the coach that recruited me. Well, this is the coach that's going to play me, too. And I'm going to see more of those opportunities if I go to this school. And it goes back to relationships. People like to talk all the time about decisions. You should pick a program. Don't pick a coach. That's a great thing to say, but in reality, it's all about relationships.
100%.
It's all about the
100%.
relationships.
You're telling me I'm going to go spend 4 years of my life away from my comforts, of my family, my friends, all that, I better like who I'm playing for.
Yeah.
I better like the guy who's running the entire operation. So I think, like you said, Dan Lanning really winning the relational aspect of it. It sounds like Oregon's doing a great job on the NIL front, and it's paying dividends for them, no pun intended, on the recruiting trail. Miss out on Nicholas Harbor, but still nothing to hang your head about if you're a Duck fan today, as they are just continuing to roll on. And we'll see with Roderick Pleasant. Chad, I want to get your thoughts on this. Is Roderick Pleasant one of the top uncommitted guys still on the board? What's the level of impact for him when it comes to track and field? Because another track guy, it sounds like, that will play a factor in his recruitment. What are you hearing in terms of how he's weighing that?
Oh, it's huge. I mean, wouldn't it be cool to see in the Olympic Games in a few years to see Nick Harbor running the 200 for the U.S. and Roderick Pleasant running the 100 for the United States team? I mean, that's really how realistic it is. I mean, those guys set records. They break records, and they're both getting faster. So it's extremely important, So USC's track program is not bad. It's not as elite as Oregon's, and that's been a big selling point for them, not just the program, but the facilities, the Nike brand attached to it. And, of course, the football obviously is high at both programs, at USC and Oregon. So if you go off football being even, if track weighs a big part of it, you lean towards Oregon. He knows some coaches there on that staff pretty well, but also Dante Williams at USC has a strong relationship also. So I was told this morning by one person extremely close to this is Roderick's torn. He feels some pressure to stay home and go to USC, but he really does like Oregon a lot, and that still has me. If he goes with that gut feeling and takes the emotions out of it, I lean towards Oregon still right now, getting that nod for Roderick Pleasant.
And I'll do you one better, Chad. The 4x100 for the gold medal. You got Nicholas Harbor running the turn. Roderick Pleasant takes the stick. He's anchored down there for the U.S.
Who's next?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see who else in this class wants to decide to run track as well, because there's just a ton of freakish athletes within this 2023 cycle. But the Oregon Ducks, if they could land Roderick Pleasant, be interested to see how much they move up in the on-3.
I don't want to say they need it, but they need it because they've had a little bit of a bumpy road down the stretch, and that's not indicative of how successful this class has been. It'd be good to see them kind of finish on a high note and land the top uncommitted corner in the nation.
Sure, the recency bias of it all, right? I mean, you get prisoner of the moment, but to land Roderick Pleasant would be a very nice finish.
And Oregon fans, don't be upset. When you land a guy, it doesn't indicate that if you land a guy 5 months ago, he's not going to be any better than the guy that you land on signing day. So don't worry about timing. It's all good.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the Tennessee Volunteers.
No.
Because we got Chad had something.
We got a break.
We're all over the place, baby. Chad Simmons Scoop. Let's roll.
Couple things, 2 parts. First thing, Cormani McClain has signed with the Colorado Buffalo, so he is going to play in Boulder for Coach Prime. And then even bigger, I say bigger because this wasn't expected, but Cameron Brandt, a longtime Stanford commit D lineman from out there in California, has flipped to the University of Michigan. We just talked about Harbor, obviously going against Michigan, going to South Carolina, but they come in. Mike Elston, Jay Harbaugh were involved. There's a lot of traction there for Michigan picking up here late, and they've come through and flipped Brandt from Stanford and getting him out of California up to Ann Arbor.
Wow. How about that? We'll start with Cormani. A little bit of, I would imagine there wasn't a ton of anxiety going forward, but still that, it's never, yeah, exactly. It's never certain until pen meets paper. I mean, this is a big deal for Coach Prime in his first 15 minutes on campus to land Travis Hunter and now Cormani McClain. I mean, what does this mean for Colorado, Josh?
Coach Prime ain't hard to find, but Cormani McClain has been. I mean, his recruitment has been very mysterious, and just when you think that you know what Cormani's going to do, he takes a left turn. So even though he was solidly committed to Colorado heading into today, even though we fully expected to get his signature, when it comes to Cormani, Money, McClain, I'm not trusting it until the ink's dry, and here we go. The ink is dry. He's officially a Colorado Buffalo. I can't wait to see what it looks like when him and Travis Hunter are patrolling that secondary out there in Colorado. It's going to be really exciting, and I fully expect to see Cormani McClain on the field in the upcoming season.
I mean, it just speaks, I think, like we talked about, the dangerous nature of someone like Deion Sanders on the recruiting trail. It doesn't matter if you're committed. Until pen meets paper, it's not done when Coach Prime is out and about recruiting. And to get a guy like Cormani McClain to commit to Colorado, I mean, heck, he got him on a visit in the not too distant past, I believe. It was like in the last month or so, got him 2 Boulder commits. I mean, an awesome recruiting visit pictures and everything. I mean, Colorado is on a tear right now. And then Cameron Brandt headed to Michigan.
That's a big get.
Big get.
Needed him. They needed help in the middle. Michigan had been trying to land Nicholas Harbor. They've been trying to land some guys. It's good to see them finish on a high note. Cameron Brandt's a very good player and a need for Michigan.
And to flip him from Stanford, Chad, I want to get your thoughts on this. You don't see kids typically flip once they're committed to an academic, absolute institution like Stanford is. Not to say anything about Michigan. What went into that flip for Cameron Brandt to eventually pick the Wolverines?
Well, I think the door was opened, obviously, when David Shaw stepped down. When there's a new head coach, in town, and we saw that with Walker Lyons, opened things back up. Now, Brandt never officially reopened his recruitment and decommitted the way Lyons did, but I know talking to him and sources the last week or so, it's really been trending towards Michigan. He visited there over the summer in Ann Arbor. They've been on him hard. He likes the idea of playing, Big Ten football. Obviously, Michigan being back-to-back playoff appearances. And as he said, they kind of found that recipe, in his words, to beat Ohio State 2 years in a row as well. So what Michigan offers, I think, on the field from a football standpoint was a big factor. And then you talked about, Stanford obviously is an elite education. You can't really go against that being one of the best in the world, But Michigan, he said, with the football side compared with their strong, I guess, public academic institution, one of the best in America, he felt that was a good enough combination and balance for him to fit in at Michigan just as well as he could at Stanford, but get better football and compete for the playoffs and national championship.
Yeah, I think Michigan just needs to get their NIL straight because they're playing great football. They have a great academic university. But if you listen to E.J. Holland-Von-Through, who covers Michigan for us, he's done a great job of breaking it down about how just Michigan has kind of half-stepped around NIL. They haven't gone all in like some other programs. And I really think that right now is the difference between landing a top 30, a top 20 class to a top 10 class for Michigan.
And especially, yeah,
you lose. They lost their best defensive recruit to Miami. Michigan made the playoffs. Miami didn't make a bowl game, and they lose Collins Etchimpong to Miami due to NIL opportunities. And that's something that this class really needed. They needed their top defensive edge to make it into this class. They lose them to a team that doesn't even make a bowl game. So I think right now Michigan just needs to figure out their NIL, and they'll be back to doing what they do on the recruiting trail.
I think that paired with an off season.
We got a hand raise over
there.
Yeah, it's no break. I was just going to chime in. It's not breaking news this time, but I still go back to it. I think the biggest loss in this class for Michigan is Dante Moore. In their backyard, Five-star quarterback. He visited there so many times. And the changeover from OCs kind of opened door for other schools at the time. And obviously Josh Gaddis didn't work out so well for him at Miami either. But that opened. I think if Gaddis was still at Michigan, this could have been a different, finale and how it played out for Dante Moore. But I think when you look back a few years, I think to me that was the biggest loss, in this class for Michigan.
And to piggyback up off of that, if you talk about, okay, so what does Michigan need to do moving forward? Get a commitment from Jaden Davis. That's what they need to do right now. Jaden Davis looks like he's all set to go to Michigan or to commit to Michigan because the way the QB dominoes are falling. But Jim Harbaugh's flirting with the NFL.
Yeah.
There's a lot of top 24 quarterbacks committing to programs right now, and I really think that had Harbaugh not flirted around with the NFL, Jaden Davis would be committed. And why is that so important? Because your quarterback is the bell cow of your class, especially a guy like Jaden Davis out of North Carolina, one of the top arms in the country. If they could get him committed early and build a class around him, it makes things much easier. So missing out on a Dante Moore, you can fix that in 2024 by going out and landing Jaden Davis early in the cycle.
And Dante Moore was someone who they threw their hat in the ring for first. I mean, they offered him as an 8th grader, did Jim Harbaugh. And so if they can get one offseason under their belt where there's no flirtation with the NFL, there's no statement having to be made about Jim Harbaugh staying with Michigan, that could be big. Chad, what were you about to say?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback off. Josh piggybacked off me. I'm going to piggyback off him. With C.J. Carr, he goes to Notre Dame. He grew up inside that stadium in Ann Arbor. His granddad, Lloyd Carr, was the head coach for Michigan. It's almost like us talking about Justice Haynes going to Alabama against Georgia, but even greater with his granddad being the head coach there. He grew up in dreams of playing in Ann Arbor, inside of that stadium, over 100,000 people there, and he goes to Notre Dame, a big rival school of Michigan. So, yes, Michigan needs to get a quarterback, a bell cow in this class much sooner than later. A lot of big-name guys are coming off this board early in 2024, and Jaden Davis has to be their top guy right now.
What are you hearing? You're the scoop guy, so what are you hearing on Jaden Davis's recruitment right now?
I think still just kind of sitting pat. And one thing, his dad told me is they're kind of letting the dust settle. Obviously, they're going through, an OC change now again at Michigan. Like you said, Harbaugh's still somewhat in the news about discussing options or potential options with NFL teams. I think Michigan's been viewed as the favorite there, I would say, since probably mid to late season during college football season. So, again, I think North Carolina's a school to watch. At one time I thought Clemson was up there, but with the OC change to Garrett Riley, he seems to kind of go in a different direction right now with other quarterbacks like Walker White from Arkansas being one that was just on campus. But it seems like Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio State's trying to come back in the mix. They were at one time the front runner about this time a year ago. They went and took Dylan Raiola instead of Jaden Davis at the time. So they're trying to, was there any bridges burned there? That's still to be determined. But it seems like Michigan and North Carolina right now are the main two consistent players in that race. And I think a decision really could come at any time. But I think, again, the dad told me, the quote was, let the dust settle. What happens at OC is Harbaugh there for the long run, and then we'll see what happens.
So had all this noise not happened with Harbaugh this offseason, do you think that on February 1st, as of today, do you think Jaden Davis would have been committed to the Wolverines already?
Yeah, probably if no OC issue, and then no Harbaugh rumblings again for the second year in a row about him wanting to be back in the NFL. I definitely think, I think people thought Jaden was on the verge of committing in November, in December. Here we are now, February 1st. He's one of the top uncommitted quarterbacks in the country.
And it's funny we got on this topic because we're all saying, Michigan, come on, Michigan, come on, Michigan. We all agree there's so much under the hood. There's so much opportunity and an opportunity for them to capitalize on their success they've had with back-to-back Big Ten titles, with back-to-back college football playoff appearances, back-to-back drubbing, not just close wins, drubbing of Ohio State, to where okay, this Cameron Brandt flip from Stanford to Michigan is nice, but we feel like it's just the tip of the iceberg for Michigan to really do some exciting things in 2024 and beyond, starting with Jaden Davis.
Yeah, you're out there. Michigan's beating their rival, Ohio State. They're making the playoffs. You got to wonder, what else do we need to do to recruit better? And I think they do need to recruit better to take it to that next level. They do a great job of developing players, but to get athletes in there that are ready to go, that's kind of the difference maker between what we're seeing from Michigan and the teams in the South.
Absolutely. And speaking of one of those teams in the South, we're about to talk about Tennessee, but since we're on Michigan, let's keep the train rolling over to Columbus, Ohio. Talk about the Ohio State Buckeyes. We talk about schools recruiting well and how we ask more of Michigan going forward, but Ohio State, currently the number 4 ranked class in the entire country. Would you know it? A little bit of Simmons scoop. We'll put a pin in this and get over to Chad Simmons' set. What we got going on, Bad?
This time my intel was right. Roderick Pleasant is an Oregon Duck. He's doing
how about it?
track in Eugene, and he's going to play football for Dan Lanning. So just as quickly as they lose Harbor to South Carolina, they get a good pickup in Roderick Pleasant, 4-star cornerback, an elite track star out of Southern California to leave home and go north to Eugene, Oregon.
Top 100 player. Roderick Pleasant, it goes back and forth. This is what I was talking about. Dan Lanning, just haymaker after haymaker. He's standing, he's taking them, he's delivering them. I mean, Dan Lanning is showing you what it takes to be a recruiter in this day and age of college football. He's not giving up all the way down to the wire. He lands the top uncommitted corner in the country on signing day. Really, really a big pickup.
I mean, Josh, how big is this to miss on Nicholas Harbor, which is never a good thing, but to come right back, like you said, with a haymaker and land one on the jaw to land the top uncommitted player still available, I believe, in Roderick Pleasant. Like, that was a huge get for them. How much does this mean for them now having 30 guys committed in this 2023 cycle?
I think you just have a better feeling heading into the offseason. Like, you kind of feel like we didn't just run out of gas down the stretch. We had a little bit left in the tank. We went toe-to-toe with some big-time programs, and I think that Oregon kind of set the tone for the 2024 class. Like, we're going to come out here and we're going to duke it out for some of the best players in the country, and if we don't land them, we're going to have a great backup plan. I mean, you saw what happened when Dante Moore flips to UCLA. What do? They go down the chain of command and they pluck Austin Novosad from Baylor, say sorry about your luck, but he's ours now. That's
huge.
what Oregon's doing.
Absolutely huge. Chad, how big of a statement is this for Oregon to have the kind of class they did in the first year under Dan Lanning, 2023 cycle? He's been on campus for like all of 15 minutes. How much does this mean for Oregon to have this kind of class in his first year?
Oh, it's big. I remember when the news broke last year when they were hiring Dan Lanning, to go to Oregon from Georgia during their playoff preparation for their first national championship. And people were like, is he too young? Is it too soon? Does he have ties to the Pacific Northwest? I mean, look, I think he's answered all the questions that are out there already in year one on the football field. I mean, yeah, they lost some games this year. Obviously, a tough start at Georgia, lost a close one to Washington, and stuff like that. But again, end of the day, you saw the team progress from start to finish, and you see them recruiting at an extremely high level. He's going into Southern California. He's beaten Leakin Riley for not just Roderick Pleasant, but from Mateo Uiagalelei, an elite big-time athlete going there, which was thought to be USC, Ohio State, Oregon swoops in. He's going to recruit nationwide. Again, just because he's from the Midwest and the Kansas area, he coached in the SEC, doesn't mean he can't coach in the Pac-12. He wants to be the best. I think he's learned from some of the best, and I think you're seeing that on the recruiting trail right now in Eugene, Oregon.
It used to be Oregon did more with less. It used to be we'll get our 3 stars, maybe a 4-star here or there from the Chip Kelly era, and we'll just kind of get OKGs, right? Our kind of guys. And now Dan Lanning absolutely putting his stake in the ground and saying we're going to go anywhere and everywhere to get top talent. But again, landing one of the best prospects on the West Coast in Roderick Pleasant.
Yeah, and you can say that. That's a great thing you can say, but Dan Lanning's proving he can do it. And even when he doesn't win, he's right there going toe-to-toe. He's going to win some more ball games next season on the field, and he's going to end up winning some of these recruitments down the stretch in 2024.
I mean, the Oregon brand, the Nike swoosh, you got Uncle Phil in the building. Like, there's a lot of juice. Big Mo has entered the building, as Chad Simmons likes to say, in Eugene, Oregon. Now, we're going to pivot back to what we were talking about just a few minutes ago before Roderick Pleasant dropped the mic, committed to the Ducks. Ohio State Buckeyes also recruiting at an extremely high level. Number 4 ranked class currently. Buckeyes, it doesn't sound like doing anything else today on the recruiting trail, but they have just continued to out-recruit Michigan. But the last 2 times, Josh, it's sort of been the same song, second verse for them. Like, we know they're going to recruit elite athletes at the skill position, but shoring up that trenches, right? The offensive and defensive line. That's kind of the next step for them. What are your thoughts on this class and them moving forward to try and beat Michigan on the field next year?
Yeah, in a rare year where Buckeyes don't get everything they wanted, especially on the defensive line, missing on Mateo Uiagalelei and then also Damon Wilson. I was a bit surprised that the Buckeyes didn't finish a little bit stronger. Of course, they land Carnell Tate and Brandon Innes, and they do what they do at wide receiver. They're going to bring in some dudes at the wide receiver position, but they came up a little bit short on the defensive line. But hey, Ohio State's a top 5 recruiting class every year. I'm not going to really be too down on them when you bring in some elite pass catchers like they did just this year.
Yeah, you can't be. I mean, Brian Hartline now going to be the offensive coordinator for the Ohio State Buckeyes, going to be the man down there in Columbus calling plays. Does that add extra firepower to their recruiting trail for them to say, yeah, I'm the receiver coach, come here, catch a lot of passes? Also, though, I'm calling the plays. I'm going to dial it up for you. Is that any extra juice for them, you think?
It definitely is, because they get a lot of negative recruiting from other programs saying, hey, Brian Hartline, you think he's going to be there for all 3-4 years that you're going to be on campus? No, he's fast-tracking on out of here. Well, guess what? Ohio State gives them a little bit of job security, or gives the players some security that Brian Hartline's going to stay along a little bit longer because he has now got the OC title, going to call some plays. That'll keep him in Columbus. That'll keep him recruiting and keep the pipeline going.
Yeah, they're going to have to work it out for them in terms of who they want to be the quarterback next year, but you got Devin Brown, who was the #1 player in the class for us here at On3. You got Kyle McCord, who's a class above him, but he's been there for a little bit now and has got a little bit more experience than Devin Brown. But either way, he's going to have guys throw the football to, and obviously the 2023 cycle, like you said, landing Brandon Ennis, landing Carnell Tate. I mean, just an embarrassment of riches at the skill position for Ohio State.
And that's what they do. And they already have the #1 wide receiver, Jeremiah Smith, committed to them for the 2024 class. I mean, they are not stopping. Ohio State comes in and does what they do. They get the electric, dynamic, offensive skill players on campus. Now, next year, they just need to go out and land a couple more defensive linemen. But, hey, they do that all the time. I don't think what happened in 2023 will happen again in 2024, missing on some of these elite defensive linemen down the stretch.
Absolutely. Now, Chad, I want to get your thoughts on this because Dylan Raiola, currently #1 player in the 2024 class for us here at On3, quarterback out of Arizona, decommitted from Ohio State. Is there some confidence that he could maybe end up being a Buckeye when all the dust settles and we're fast forward in the tape a year? Or is it, hey, Ohio State's now back on the recruiting trail and actively looking for another Signer Cole in that class?
Yeah, I think back on the trail is the way to put it, JD. I mean, obviously, I don't think Raiola goes back. Now, we've seen, guys go back a couple of times, this cycle to the same school, and it does happen, but it's pretty rare. Right now, I do not think Raiola is considering or even really engaged in conversations with Ohio State. Could things change moving forward? Sure. That always could happen. But I think right now Ohio State's going a different direction, and the same with Dylan Raiola. They just offered recently a 2024 quarterback, Julian Sayin, out of Carlsbad, California, who's an Alabama commit. And, of course, Julian says all the right things. But he also let me know that, hey, if Bama's going to recruit other quarterbacks, I'm going to keep, communication, at least relationships going with other schools too. And Bama just offered Aaron Nolan over the weekend, another 2024 quarterback from the Atlanta area. I think he's one to watch. Of course, Jaden Davis, we talked about a little bit too, trying to get back in there with him and his camp. But right now, I do not see Raiola and Ohio State ending up together this cycle.
How does that really happen? I mean, I understand making an emotional decision because you've just been taking these visits and you go check out Ohio State and you love everything about it and you commit to them. But how does it happen to where now that he's decommitted, he's not even considering Ohio State?
I think it goes back to why he decommitted. What happened from the time he committed to Ohio State to the time he decommitted. Not just saying Raiola, but just anybody in general. When you commit to decommit, something has to go, I would say, somewhat wrong in that time. Whether just maybe your emotions run off. You don't feel as good as you once did, or maybe you don't think you click as well as you did before with the staff. Maybe there is some coaching changes. OC gone, Hartline, the new OC. What happens offensively there? Now, Raiola, obviously decommitted before the move for Hartline, but I think it just kind of other factors happen. And I think one thing I can say about Raiola is he is an emotional kid. When I talk to him after every visit, he does rave, which I kind of try to give that whole quote-unquote 48-hour rule. Let the visit wear off. Let me talk to you, when you leave, but then again, maybe 4 or 5 days later, are you feeling the same way about that school, a week later, 2 weeks later than you were when you left that campus an hour after that visit? And if you're not, the interest probably is not that high. And again, I think Raiola loved Ohio State for what it was at the time, but in the end, just did not feel that was the right fit for him as a player and as a person.
Interesting. And it seems like in this 2023 cycle for Ohio State, we talked about it. I mean, they are making an effort to get tougher in the trenches. Not they're not tough already. I think they took a big jump from 2021 to 2022, but the standard is the standard at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Like it's hey, we beat Michigan, we win the Big Ten, play for natties, and that hasn't happened the last 2 years. How have you seen that? Yeah.
Oddly enough, Ryan Day has done a great job, but he's also not doing enough at Ohio State right now, and there's a lot of pressure on him. I think that this recruiting class is solid. I think that there's a couple pieces that they wish they would have probably added to the class before signing day, but if you're an Ohio State Buckeye fan, you got to be excited about this recruiting class in 2023.
Yeah, and they still added close to double-digit linemen on the offensive and defensive side in terms of like trench players and getting tougher. So they're making the right strides. Ohio State is not necessarily going toe-to-toe with Michigan on the recruiting trail, but Ohio State's still making an effort to transform, if you will, to take that next step. Now, Josh, we said there wouldn't be much movement in the top 10.
Lied.
There's a little bit of movement, all right? So a little white lie, if you will, a little fib as Oregon jumps from number 9 all the way up to number 8 to the Ducks. Your thoughts on this movement within the top 10?
About 2 weeks before the early signing period, Notre Dame was sitting at number 5. So that kind of shows that they fizzled out down the stretch while Oregon was outside the top 10. They're now number 8. I think Oregon's done a great job battling it out and getting solidly inside that top 10.
Yeah, absolutely. And a team that is just hanging around outside the top 10 right now. Tennessee Volunteers had a storybook year on the field. I mean, they found out that goalposts, in fact, do not float as they threw that in the river after they beat Alabama. What are your thoughts on the Vols as they've put together a good class? They were 15 last year, jumped up, like I said, right around number 12 at last check. Your thoughts on the Vols and this 2023 haul?
Well, you got your franchise quarterback in Nico Imaliava, and right there, that is the most important piece, not just for this class, but possibly he's going to have an impact on 24, on the 25 class, on the 26 class, because guys are going to want to come and play with Nico. You got David Hobbs in there, Caleb Herring, Arian Carter. Chad, I want to throw it to you right now. Are you a little bit surprised Tennessee couldn't find their way into the top 10?
A little. Obviously getting Nico, that early in the process last spring, obviously he definitely attracted guys and got them on the Tennessee radar and helped land some guys in this class for sure. But, yeah, I think we, kind of thought at that time, and then you combine that with the season Tennessee had at 11-2 this year, that they would kind of get into that top 10. But, again, number 12, it's like talking almost like Georgia number 2. Tennessee's number 12 class is very strong, and I love what they did, not just with Nico, but a guy like Devin Hobbs. They went head-to-head with Alabama and Georgia and beat them both. Hobbs was high on the board of both SEC programs. Then they went head-to-head in the end, face-to-face with Josh Heupel, Nick Saban for Arian Carter, a local prospect, a linebacker in Smyrna, Tennessee. And he was all Bama leading up to that last OV. Josh Heupel made that his personal project to get involved, had hourly conversations, answered all the questions from mom, from him, his family. They got him on campus. He didn't even want to leave to go to San Antonio for the All-American Bowl. He wanted to stay and practice with the team for bowl preparation and be a part of that program right then. What Heupel's doing, what he's building, is something pretty special in Knoxville right now.
I think Arian Carter was probably one of the coolest stories of this cycle that I was following. I started here on September 1st. And shortly after I started, Arian Carter was a commitment to Memphis. And shortly after I started, he picked up an offer from Alabama. Then came Miami. Then came LSU. Then came USC. And you know what went out the door? His commitment to Memphis. That's the result of that. But Chad, you also got to cover this recruitment. Do you think? Tell us a little bit more about Arian Carter and his rise.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times you and I talked about him on Inside Scoop, Josh. Seemed like twice a week for a long time because he was adding 2 or 3 offers in between every show, it seemed like.
Big time offers.
Alabama and Auburn came in after his senior tape got out pretty early in September. that first weekend, he was at Alabama. He was back at Alabama 3 times after that later on during the season, and they seemed to be in the driver's seat. You know, even Tennessee faded some. I mean, he talked about an OV to LSU. He went up to Michigan, talked about Ohio State. Other schools were involved. But I think you and I were just wondering, what's taking so long to decommit from Memphis? You know, but I think that kind of shows what kind of person he is about. He just felt bad about being committed to that school, a hometown program that took a chance on him early before anybody else did. And he felt bad about, decommitting from them publicly. And I think they knew all along, once those guys came in with those offers, he's going to Bama, he's going to Knoxville, going to Ann Arbor. They weren't going to get him, but he took as long as he could to decommit, just out of respect to them. And in the end, a great story, man. The kid played running back last year, moved over to linebacker full-time this year while still playing some running back for his team. He'll do whatever it takes. He's the kind of kid you want, not just on your football team, but in the locker room. He'll make other guys around him better at Tennessee. This was a huge win, I feel like, for Josh Heupel. As big as Nico was and other guys were in this class this cycle, I think Carter's one Tennessee fans will love for a long time.
What did teams see on tape? I mean, what was with the senior film that just got everybody offering him?
The way he could play 3 downs at linebacker in college football, I think, in the SEC. The speed, the size, the athleticism. They're used to seeing him in the Smyrna offense just run downhill, chunking 6, 7, 8 yards of play, breaking one every now and then as a running back. They put him on defense in the middle. He's chasing balls sideline to sideline. He's blitzing up the A and B gap, sacking the quarterback. He's chasing guys down the field. He's covering in drops. And I think once that was seen, I think he put 3-game highlights out after those first 3 games, and the floodgates opened from there. And Tennessee won in the end.
And Tennessee was one of those schools where phenomenal success on the field, and they didn't finish in the top 10, but it also wasn't like they didn't sign anybody they wanted to sign, right? Like signing day came and went in December, and they got pen and paper from just about everybody they had committed. So in some respects, you're saying, okay, is there a lag in terms of on-field results that are going to translate to maybe even a higher-ranked class in the coming seasons, Josh?
Yeah, there's always a lag, a 1-year lag in recruiting. So what you're going to see Tennessee really turn it up for 2 reasons. One, their offense is exciting. They put a proof of concept out there for dynamic offensive athletes. Here's what you can do if you come to Tennessee. And the other big piece to why they're going to recruit better is because of Nico Imaliava. He's already on campus. He was participating in bowl practices. He's going to quickly, even if he doesn't start or get reps in his freshman year, he's still going to be the face of that team for moving forward. And there's going to be guys that come in on visits, that come in on official visits, that meet with Nico, and they just link up with him and they say, okay, this is a guy that I can see myself playing with for the next 3 to 4 years.
In terms of juice, like on the recruiting trail, it feels like Tennessee is one of those teams that's just continuing to gain more and more steam, more and more excitement, more and more traction. I mean, Chad, are you noticing that on the recruiting trail when you're talking to these different kids and they're putting out top 10s or top 8s, top 4s, as we're kind of seeing more and more of that at the high school level now, especially with the 2024 class even? Is that something you're noticing, that there's more buzz around the Power T?
Oh, 100%. I was just down in South Florida recently. Joe Shiesa, trader known as JoJo down there from Hollywood, Chaminade, Madonna High School, one of the premier receivers in the 24 class. He put out a top 5 recently, and the only school on there he hasn't visited was Tennessee. He's going off what he saw, talking to Coach Pope, the receivers coach. Obviously, the Nico effect, the quarterback he could play with in the future there, and what Heupel's building there. So, yeah, you're hearing it. I mean, guys like Ryan Wingo, obviously the offensive guys, I mean, they see what Heupel does, how fast they play. I mean, Jalen Hyatt winning the Blitnikoff Award this year, but what he put up stats-wise and numbers-wise, now put himself in position, maybe a first-round pick coming out of nowhere and setting records this year at Tennessee was a huge statement. The wins they had over Alabama, Florida, LSU, being ranked number 1 in America. But, yes, the proof on the field is making a huge impact in recruiting moving forward for Tennessee.
A lot of juice around Tennessee.
Definitely.
A lot of juice, a lot of momentum.
You can literally feel it building. And, hey, look, Tennessee's been down for a couple decades, so it's not going to all come back all at once. If you're a Tennessee fan, you got to love what you signed in 2023, and you got to be really excited about the optimism for 2024.
Another team that's developing a whole bunch of traction, a whole bunch of buzz after just 1 season under Brian Kelly, the LSU Tigers, sitting at number 5 in the On3 team consensus recruiting rankings.
We're going to just have to hold off on talking LSU for a second.
I love
because
it.
Chad Simmons got something for us.
Let's go.
Yeah, no offense, Brian Kelly, but Ellis Robinson IV just committed to the University of Georgia. #1 cornerback in the country for 2024, down at IMG Academy out of the Connecticut, New York area, up on the northeastern coast. Picked the Georgia Bulldogs over Alabama, Colorado, LSU, and Miami. Again, a huge addition to an already an elite class in 2024 that's building under Kirby Smart.
How about that? Ellis Robinson, one of the top prospects in 2024, #1 corner. He's taking his talents to Athens.
This is what Georgia does. They don't just land great players; they land a bunch of #1 players at their position. Ellis Robinson making it, I shouldn't say final because he's still got a year until he puts pen to paper and actually makes it final. But Ellis Robinson's a huge pickup. Chad, what was it that really got Ellis Robinson to commit this early to the Dogs?
So obviously Ellis and I have a good relationship, and he gave me the story a while back about why he's going to Georgia, and he just broke it down. The second visit he took to Athens last summer, he knew it. He said it felt like home. Just the people, not just the coaches, but the players, the surrounding staff, the academic staff, nutritional people, he even referenced them, just made him feel right at home. And I think obviously when you're looking at your options as an elite recruit like him who can go wherever he wants to in America, it comes down to where you feel the best and who you think can develop you the best as a player and as a young man. He talked about his connection with cornerbacks coach Fran Brown, DC Will Muschamp, of course Kirby Smart, being a former defensive back. Georgia's always building a strong defense. He wants to be a big part of that. And obviously nothing's ever final, like you said. We're still 10 months away
12.
until he signs in December. He'll be an early enrollee at IMG, so give him a couple more months in advance to sign. But no, Ellis says he's locked in. Look, he plans to get back to Georgia in March, in April, do some recruiting. He mentioned guys like KJ Bolden, guys like Dylan Raiola, guys he wants to kind of come join him in Athens that he'll now go to work on. But this is a big get for Georgia, an elite player that I think will fill big shoes in Georgia's defense.
Yeah, and we talked a lot about what Alabama did in 2023 and why Georgia couldn't take them over in 2023 to become the #1 team. But hey, with this commitment right now, Georgia has the #1 class in 2024, and they have some studs lined up. Tell us a little bit about Peyton Woodyard and Landon Thomas.
Yeah, Woodyard, obviously an elite safety from St. John Bosco out in the L.A. area. Obviously one of the premier high school programs in the country. I mean, going out there to watch modern day play, St. John Bosco, you're seeing about 50 Power 5 Division I athletes on the field in pregame warm-ups on each side. So it's pretty impressive, and he'll be well coached out there, prepared to go to Georgia. He just kind of fell in love. He has some family in Atlanta, visited Georgia a couple of times on his own for games, junior days, camped there in the summer of 2021, left with the offer then. Just a big safety, good ball skills, kind of fits what Georgia's looking for at the safety position. Landon Thomas, again, talking about tight end play, like a big, versatile wide receiver playing tight end in that 6'4", 6'5" range, 220, South Georgia toughness, Colquitt County High School, great ball skills, body control, plays in a pass-happy offense. He'll go in ready to catch balls under Todd Hartley, the offensive scheme at the University of Georgia. He'll be another mismatch guy. Georgia will move around, create some mismatches with it, Georgia. So they're off to a fast start, both offensively and defensively, here in 2024.
Currently the #1 class in Georgia, not just keeping it in the Southeast. Like, obviously tons of talent in the state of Georgia, tons of talent in the state of Florida, but Brock Bowers, West Coast, Darnell Washington, West Coast, Peyton Woodyard, West Coast. Like, the reach for Kirby Smart and this staff, I mean, it's saying something. If you play ball nationally, we will come and find you and get you to Athens.
When you start winning national championships, it opens the door for you to recruit not just good players, but elite players coast to coast. And Georgia right now is capitalizing on that. They're doing exactly what they saw Nick Saban do when he started his run. Once you open that door after winning a national title to the rest of the country, man, can you start recruiting. And you're seeing, and look, this 2024 class is going to be really fun because we just see the Dogs overtake Alabama. But how many more lead changes do you think we're going to see before this signing day closes? It's going to be a blast.
It's going to be a heavyweight bout. You got Saban in one corner, you got Smart on the other corner, and we got, like you said, 10 to 12 months before this whole cycle wraps up. But Kirby Smart, Lands a nice one on the chin. Landon Ellis Robinson, he's going to be a dog here in the not-too-distant future. And according to Chad Simmons, that commitment sounds like it's going to stick, at least for the time being. Ellis Robinson taking his talents to UGA. Now, where were we, Josh?
We're about to talk LSU.
Talk about the Tigers a little bit. Brian Kelly and company, currently the number 5 class in the On3 consensus team recruiting rankings. They've done a great job locking down some of the top talent within the state of Louisiana. Shelton Sampson, Ricky Collins. I mean, they got a lot of guys that are in-state that are committing to be Tigers.
Yeah, and Brian Kelly, it got off to a little bit of a bumpy start. Like, we didn't know if he was going to be a real culture fit at LSU. We didn't know how things were going to go. They opened the season and they lose to Florida State, and we didn't know what Florida State was at the time. But then they get things back on track. I love the pickup of 5-star offensive tackle Zalance Hurd. If you're Brian Kelly, you know that you built Notre Dame off of what you recruited on the offensive and defensive lines. And here's Zalance Hurd, just a mountain of a man. He's going to come in and have the ability to at least compete for starting playing time at the right tackle position as soon as he walks on campus. I love Shelton Sampson, big-time playmaking wide receiver out of Louisiana. And they get Ricky Collins as well, maybe their future quarterback. So Brian Kelly in his first year at LSU, bringing in a top 5 class, unbelievable finish, a great start to his tenure when we didn't know exactly how this was going to go with Brian Kelly, but it looks like he picked up right where he left off at Notre Dame, and he's not going to skip a beat, at least on the recruiting trail at LSU.
And that was one of the things that the peanut gallery was yelling from Notre Dame fans, saying, well, yeah, that's great, but is he going to recruit? Does he want to recruit like what it takes to recruit in the SEC? And we've seen so far a top 5 class. Brian Kelly recruits. They're making an effort to keep that top talent home.
Yeah, they took the restrictor plate off Brian Kelly and his recruiting efforts, because at Notre Dame, you got to recruit. You're held to an academic standard. So right then and there, you kind of pare down your pool of guys that you can pick from. Not everybody is suited to be a student at Notre Dame. Of course, they can all play football at Notre Dame, but it's a different thing to go to South Bend and be a student there. Now he's in Louisiana at LSU, and he has all of the weapons at his disposal right now. So he's going to go out and recruit like an SEC coach should.
We talked about recruiting in the state of Louisiana. He's also gone outside of the boot and gotten some top talent. Javian Toviano from the state of Texas. I mean, they've got some really big-time players coming to the boot. Is there anyone in particular that you're excited about from this class that's maybe not from the state of Louisiana?
Deshaun Womack, 6'4", 245 pounds out of the DMV area. He's the type of guy that's going to really get LSU back to what they need to be. You can recruit, you got to recruit the boot, but you're not taking 25 guys out of Louisiana. So if you're going to go get a player, go get a guy like a Deshaun Womack who's going to come in and be an instant impact type player.
And to recruit the way they have in the first year. Now have a little bit of proof of concept. Like you said, recruiting still lags a little bit. There's still going to be, you would think, a little bit of a bump coming from what they did this year, playing for an SEC title.
And they're going to put up some big numbers on offense again with Jaden Daniels returning and that offense kind of clicking a little bit more towards the end of the season than it did in the beginning. And bringing in a guy like Zalance Hurd to solidify that offensive line helps your offense immediately.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And so they're recruiting nationally well. They're recruiting Louisiana well. Recruiting the state of Florida reasonably well, but there is no shortage of suitors that are vying for that talent in the state of Florida. Let's take a look at what's going on in the Sunshine State, Josh.
Let's talk about the Sunshine State. Are we talking about the teams in the state of Florida?
Let's do it all. Let's do it all. Let's talk about, we'll start it off with just Miami and Florida going toe-to-toe on the recruiting trail.
That had to be the storyline.
Right?
I
mean, they were going back and forth. It was Mario Cristobal, it was Billy Napier, and just a ton going on there. And then also you got Florida State, who's won the Sunshine State the last year or so. What are your thoughts on where you stand if you're, Florida, Miami, and Florida State in terms of recruiting?
Yeah, well, first of all 3 teams are trying to regain their footing on the football field. You saw Florida State maybe take that next step with a 10-win season, but overall, they're still trying to find their way. And you see this with Florida State because Mike Norvell's in year 3. That's why they kind of finished where they did. They're not getting the benefit of the doubt anymore. Florida State had to show proof of concept. They did that. They're going to recruit better in 2024. But when it comes to Miami and Florida, both of those teams came shot out of the gates, really recruiting hard because you had Billy Napier in year 1, you had Mario Cristobal in year 1, and you had recruits giving them the benefit of the doubt. That's what happens in year 1. But the intense rivalry between those two teams just blew up the NIL market in the state of Florida. It was unlike anything we've seen anywhere else. The head-to-head battles over guys like Cormani McClain, Jaden Rashada, Mark Fletcher, Jakeem Jackson, Malik Bryant, the names go on. You never really see Florida State and Miami, or Florida and Miami, go head-to-head on this many guys, but what happened? NIL and ego got involved. The market, the NIL market in the state of Florida was the most inflated market due to these two teams going head-to-head, just bidding up NIL opportunities to these recruits. And what happened? We saw the fallout. We saw Jaden Rashada ask out of his NLI. Things just people got way ahead of their skis, and they need to slow down a little bit. I don't think we're going to see these same matchups in 2024, but the 2023 cycle was one for the ages in the state of Florida.
Sure, and at least that's the way it looked from the NIL market, because you got John Ruiz being really aggressive. You got the story coming out about Jaden Rashada and the $13 million. But I want to focus on Florida State just a little bit here, because Florida State is in a unique position where they're the more developed team. I mean, they're going into year 4 for Mike Norvell and company, and they're still, it seems like, at the recruiting level at least, a little bit behind the 8 ball. What's the level of concern for Florida State?
You say that because they're doing so well in the transfer.
Absolutely,
portal. Right. So they're hitting the portal hard because there's so many holes in their roster. There needs to be a major infusion of talent, so they're selling the ability to come in and play. And I think with Jermaine Johnson coming in from Georgia and being a one-and-done first-round draft pick, that set the proof of concept that we talked about so much. That opened the floodgates for more transfers to come in. But this isn't necessarily a strategy for Florida State. You got to remember, they're still recruiting the high school level, just like Georgia, just like Alabama. They're offering Quay Russaw. They're offering Caleb Downs. They're offering the best players in the country. They're just not coming to Florida State. So how does Mike Norvell infuse talent? He's got to go to the transfer portal. Now, they're taking double-digit transfers for the last couple years at FSU. For Mike Norvell to really get this thing cooking at Florida State, they need to recruit the high school level better, start landing elite talent, not just good talent. They need elite talent from the high school level. That'll result in taking less players from the portal. They're never going to stop recruiting the portal, but I think if Mike Norvell had his way, he'd be taking 3 to 4 portal players instead of 10, 11, 12 portal guys, and compensating that with elite talent out of the high school ranks. So while Florida State maybe isn't recruiting as well as they'd like to at the high school level, they're supplementing that with the transfer portal. And I think over the next couple years, if Mike Norvell can keep winning, those numbers will balance out, and you'll see a little bit less from the portal and more from high school.
It's kind of the ever-evolving balance we're seeing in college football with the portal and then also building at the high school level, and you want to be somewhere in that sweet spot where it's primarily high school level, you're developing talent, and then shoring up needs.
But the fact that you got to win now, that's a great idea. Hey, let's just take high school kids, let's bring them in, let's teach them our culture, let's develop them. By year 3 or 4, they'll be really good players. Well, not in the transfer portal era, and not in the win now era. The win now era means that I got to win this season. If Mike Norvell comes back, bouncing back with a 7-win season, a 6-win season, that's just not going to cut it. They're not going to give him time to develop those players. So he's got to go to the portal and get instant impact recruits.
And speaking of another coach that's just finished up his first year, Brent Venables in Oklahoma. Brent Venables obviously just finished up a 6-7 season where there was a lot of close games that could have gone either way. They've been really aggressive in the portal. Currently have a top 10 class on the recruiting trail. They got some ballers. I mean, they got PJ Adebaware, they got Jackson Arnold, they got Peyton Bowen. Your thoughts on the Sooners and just where they stand moving forward in the Brent Venables era in this 2023 class?
Well, the first thing I look at when you look at their Oklahoma's recruiting class is quarterback Jackson Arnold, 5-star plus athlete, and he could be a future Heisman Trophy winner. We don't say that about many guys on here, but you talk to Sam Spiegelman, who's watched him play countless times. Sam will tell you, if there's one guy he wants in his corner to win one ball game for him, it's Jackson Arnold. We're going to see him. Look, if Dylan Gabriel goes down for any reason and opens the door for Jackson Arnold, I mean, we could see him take over the reins as a freshman. I'm not expecting that to happen, but he's got that type of ability.
It's one of those situations where you don't always see the freshman quarterback come in and necessarily play a factor in pushing the room, but Jackson Arnold, Gatorade National Player of the Year, good athlete, good arm, has so many tools to where if Dylan Gabriel at all has a lag in his play and they need to go to someone else, to another hot hand,
crack
Jackson
the door.
Arnold could be that guy that kicks the door down if you were to leave it cracked. Now, within this class, we talked about it, Peyton Bowen.
Oh, yeah.
Playmaker.
We got to talk more about Peyton Bowen.
Yeah, tell me your thoughts on him and just what he could mean for this class in 2023.
I think he's one of the few players that you can almost guarantee to come in and make an impact from day one. They need help in the secondary, but more importantly, I shouldn't say more importantly, but also he has the ability to change the game in the return game. Punt return, kick return, whatever it is. He can get you a touchdown when you need it. Peyton Bowen, I think, is going to make his way onto the field as a special team guy, but ultimately you're just not going to be able to keep him off, and he's going to be one of the lockdown safeties in that secondary for Oklahoma moving forward into the future.
Yeah, no redshirting him.
I don't
No
think so.
redshirt for Peyton Bowen, sounds like at least. And he's also already on campus, as is Jackson Arnold. PJ Adebaware is a guy that I'm really excited to watch him develop. His brother is at Northwestern. Sounds like he could be an NFL draft pick. PJ Adebaware, also a 5-star. He fits so perfectly that mold that Brent Venables has on the defensive line, where you have guys that can rush the passer, but also if you need them to, they can peel off and cover a running back on a swing route. Like that kind of freakish athleticism. PJ's been a guy that has just blown up on the national scale for a while now, but he really popped in the Under Armour All-American game. Charles Power was just raving about him coming back from watching that display and that dominance that he had. I mean, he's a guy. He's a guy.
Explosiveness off the edge, definitely solidified himself as a 5-star. Charles Power saw him at the San Antonio game, and just right then and there knew when you're competing against the best of the best and making it look easy, you're a 5-star.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A couple more schools I want to get to as we round this show out. USC and Notre Dame. Two schools that are in similar position in the sense that first year under new head coach, both hit the recruiting trail fairly hard. Now, USC really built through the portal, but still did really well on the recruiting trail, landing guys like Malachi Nelson, who after Caleb Williams leaves could very easily be the guy that takes over the reins. And I mean, it's hard to not talk about the Heisman Trophy conversation with any quarterback under Lincoln Riley. Your thoughts on USC as well as Notre Dame, where they stand with Marcus Freeman?
I think that USC did what they needed to do. Lincoln Riley is one of the best quarterback developers of our generation, but he's becoming that. You know, guys know him to be developing Heisman quarterbacks. Malachi Nelson, Zachariah Branch, I think are going to be a duo that we talk about for a couple years to come. I love what Malachi Nelson brings to the football field. And when it comes to Notre Dame, I'm a little disappointed in their class.
Sure.
I know they finished in the top 10, but at one point they were number 4. I could kind of see what was happening with Peyton Bowen trending away to Oklahoma or Oregon, but I did not expect them to lose Dylan Edwards to Colorado. And previous to that, they lost their top-rated recruit, Keon Keeley, and he commits to Alabama eventually. I think that if Notre Dame, you lose Brian Kelly, who's known as a schemer. Mm-hmm. He's the ball coach. You bring in Marcus Freeman, and what you lose in experience, you hope that you're gaining with ability to recruit. And to see kind of the top of the class crumble down the stretch, to me was a little bit disappointing. Irish still finished top 10, but they miss a few key pieces, and I think in 2024 they'll try to solidify that.
Yeah, that rivalry on the recruiting trail between Lincoln Riley and Marcus Freeman, as they're going to both land haymakers to try and be top 10 classes. That's one that I'm very excited to watch as it continues to develop. And you said something during our production meeting that I thought was really insightful. The obstacles for Notre Dame are different than anywhere else in the country when it comes to recruiting and admissions and also just geographically.
Yeah. It's not easy to get to South Bend.
Not easy.
And that was my concern with Peyton Bowen. When I started here on September 1st, and we started talking about Peyton Bowen, I looked, okay, when was his commitment to Notre Dame and when was his official visit? Both were over the summer. He visited, he used his official visit there in July. I made a mental note of that. I said, wow, a kid from Texas already burned his official visit to Notre Dame. I hope that the Irish don't have a lot of competition down the stretch for him because they lost their access. You can't just get in your car and drive to South Bend, Indiana from Texas. And down the road, down the stretch, we saw exactly that happen. Peyton Bowen took some visits. Yes, he did make it back to Notre Dame on an unofficial, but you would have loved to have that official visit in your pocket to bring him in that final weekend before the early signing period and maybe lock him in. It doesn't happen. He gets, the rest is history. He flips to Oregon momentarily, but in the end, it's Oklahoma. But those are kind of the downfalls, the pitfalls if you're at Notre Dame that you got to watch out for. Marcus Freeman learned the hard way in his first year.
And to still have a top 10 class, not bad, and I think they're going to continue to gain steam.
Yeah,
but like you said, just maybe a recalibration in strategy for the Irish, but remains to be seen. That
this
USC
class
Notre
looks
Dame
a
rivalry.
lot different if you got Peyton Bowen and Keon Keeley at the top of this class.
Sure. I mean, that rivalry going forward, USC Notre Dame, Going to be a lot of fun to watch on the field as well as on the recruiting trail. Well, Deuce Robinson actually had a quote from an interview with ESPN talking about Major League Baseball, talking about college football. I just want to read it off here from my computer. And was asked about the possibility of getting selected in the MLB draft. And it reads as such: "It's definitely a goal. We wanted to hopefully get drafted and then have to make a decision from there. I want to play college football, but obviously it plays a role. If I can get drafted pretty highly, it'll definitely play a role in my decision." Now, Chad, I want to throw it to you. What are your thoughts having heard that quote from Deuce Robinson? Not necessarily anything super different than what you had communicated to us earlier on the live show, but your thoughts hearing that and Major League Baseball with Deuce Robinson.
I mean, it makes me think that he could just wait this out and not sign, just get drafted, see where he gets drafted, and that's we're talking about what, 4 months away, you know. So, yeah, I mean, there's not a lot really there, but could he choose to go ahead and sign sometime in the near future? Yes, but it seems to me that baseball has really gotten super serious here over the last few weeks, and that's kind of where his mind's at right now, waiting to see what happens with baseball first.
Interesting. Well, obviously one of the top talent. I mean, I never had the choice to go between Major League Baseball or go play college football or do something else. So Deuce Robinson, a wealth of talent, obviously. A very interesting quote there as he's trying to decide what he's going to do for the future. But, Chad, appreciate you dropping that insight on us. Let's move forward here looking at the 5-star plus kind of players. Okay. The 5-star plus. So do you want to explain to the people at home what a 5-star plus kind of football player is for us here at On 3?
It's when all 4 ranking services agree that this is a 5-star. So when ESPN, Rivals, 24/7, and On 3 all come together with the same 5-star ranking, we put a little plus next to their name.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was no shortage of 5-star pluses for us here at On 3, and we have a graphic on that. We can pull that up here in just a second. But, I mean, to be a 5-star plus, according to every service, I mean, Arch Manning, Keon Keeley, guys that we just talked about, Jackson Arnold, and there's so many pieces here that are going to make. I mean, would you say these are, you know, quote unquote can't misses at the next level if you're talking about a 5-star plus caliber player where everybody in the country says, yeah, they're a 5-star?
That's what the industry's telling you. I mean, that's definitely what the industry's telling you. And these are the guys that we don't agree on much. When it comes to the recruiting industry, you know, there's always source wars, there's always ranking wars, but these are the guys that everybody agrees on, that these are the can't-miss players in the 2023 class.
Without a doubt. And looking at that list, is there someone that pops up there and you say they're for sure going to be a name to know this coming season? I mean, all of them are, but someone in specific.
But, I mean, Arch Manning's a guy that you got to follow. Peyton Bowen we love. We've talked a lot about Jackson Arnold as a potential Heisman Trophy winner. So, yeah, some of the guys that we see as 5-star pluses are not only going to be first-round draft picks, but potential Heisman candidates. It's going to be an exciting. If you're going to follow anybody, follow these guys.
I mean, we're talking about USC a second ago. Zachariah Branch.
Love him.
Stick a dynamite in the slot, man. I mean, he is a guy that can be a game breaker for you in the punt return game, can do a lot in the passing game, obviously. Just a mismatch nightmare.
Just one of the most electric players. He sells tickets.
I mean, he's a prototypical slot receiver.
To watch a guy like Zachariah Branch
100%. Like when he catches this punt right here, I guess when he drops that punt and picks it up, you're holding your breath and saying, okay, is he going to take this thing the distance? Like it just very, very elite agility skills and makes you miss in a phone booth. And again, a 5-star plus where everybody in the country is saying, yeah, one of the best in the nation, and played against some top talent.
And a guy that we're probably going to see play in the 2023 season.
Absolutely. A guy's going to play early. Now, while we have the 5-star plus, there were some guys that were very, very close, and maybe 3 of the 4 services had them as a 5-star. I want to touch on that really quick here. Our number 1 player, Nico Iamaleava, got Cormani McClain, Peyton Bowens, Lance Hurd, Yanze Pierre. What does it say about some of these players to still be in that upper echelon of yet just about the majority of the services agree one of the tops in the country?
It means that we really, really like him. We don't maybe not love him, but we really like. And who's not ranking Nico as a 5-star? Tell me that. I mean, come on, let's go. But Cormani McClain drops at the end, but he's still an honorable mention. Some of these guys, they're going to be instant impact players, potentially can't miss as well. If you're one of the players on honorable mention, you are doing it. I mean,
absolutely,
you are doing it at the highest level.
And it's sort of splitting hairs to a degree, right?
Absolutely.
Of okay, 4-star versus 5-star. Obviously, there's some difference there, but to be 3 of the 4 services having you as a 5-star, still a very big deal.
Yeah,
well,
huge deal.
As we turn our sights from the 2023 cycle, just about got a bow on it. Some of the last signatures, pen meeting paper. Got to look to 2024, no?
Yeah,
got to look to 2024.
It's time. It's time to turn that page.
It's about time. Chad, who are some of the top names to know in your mind as we look to the 2024 cycle getting revved up here?
Well, I think obviously you got to start at the top. We've talked about Dylan Raiola, obviously
Number one
player, the only 5-star plus guy right now in 2024. We've talked about him a lot already. So just quickly on him, I think the 3 to watch heading into the next round of visits are Georgia, Nebraska, and USC. Fresh off the visit to USC last weekend, huge visit there for him and Lincoln Riley. He's a Nebraska legacy. Obviously, dad, one of the best players ever to come through Lincoln and play offensive line for the Cornhuskers, and you have his uncle coaching there in Lincoln right now. Then, of course, Georgia, his connection there with Todd Monk and that staff at Georgia as well. I think, speaking of Georgia, just the state of Georgia alone, K.J. Bolden, Mike Matthews, Sammy Brown are just 3 of the best players in the Peach State, all early 5-stars in the 2024 class. I think just quickly on K.J. Bolden, I think 3 schools to watch early. Clemson, he was just there this past weekend, Georgia, and Ohio State. Alabama's up there too. With Mike Matthews, a list a little bit longer, a little bit more national, with Notre Dame, USC, of course, Alabama, Clemson, Georgia, Tennessee, just to name a few for Mike Matthews. And with Sammy Brown, he was at Clemson this past weekend as well. He lives like less than an hour from the University of Georgia. I think early on this looks to be a Clemson-Georgia battle for the 5-star linebacker from Jefferson, Georgia. And then to round it out, David Stone. 5-star defensive lineman playing at IMG Academy. He's from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. This time a year ago, if you asked me where David's going, I would have said Oklahoma, Oklahoma, Oklahoma. Right now, you ask me a year later, I'm going to say Michigan State, Michigan State, Michigan State. He took back-to-back visits to East Lansing here the last 2 weekends in January. How often does that happen? A kid in Florida, IMG, taking 2 unofficials back-to-back weeks. To an out-of-state school. This the second time, which we know is very key, taking his mom with him. So to me, he wanted her, like what he told me, he wanted her to see what he saw, see if she felt the same way that he feels. But right now, Michigan State's in a great spot for David Stone. Those are just 5 names to know. There's many more out there for sure in 2024.
And we'll be talking about it on the inside scoop throughout the entire offseason. But let's look at the On3 Consensus 2024 team rankings as they stand right now. We got a new number 1, JD, Georgia, with the commitment of Ellis Robinson, jumps to the top spot. Alabama closely at second. Look at the Florida Gators off to a quick start in 2024, followed by Ohio State, Notre Dame, Louisville, who got off to a quick start in 23, is in the top 10, followed by South Carolina, Florida State, LSU, and Michigan State.
Never too early to start looking at those rankings, and just about half of that top 10 is made up of SEC schools. So the South continues to produce top talent, and schools in the South continue to keep that top talent home. Now, Josh, I want to get you out of here with this. When we talk about the 2024 class rankings, there's going to be a lot of movement. It's going to evolve a lot until December when we get the early signing period. Is there a school that's maybe a sleeper right now that you think could make some moves on the recruiting trail that we could see within that top 10?
Well, Colorado.
Yeah.
I think that Colorado is a program that for the first time I've been covering recruiting for 15 years now, and I don't think I've seen Colorado finish in the top 10. I think we could see that potentially in 2024. I think the Florida Gators, who are sitting there at 3, need to have a really big year, and they're off to a great start. So I think that these rankings, we're going to have so much movement, especially over the next 2 to 3 months into the spring and into the summer, that I can't wait. 2024 is going to be really exciting.
Oh, going to be absolutely unbelievable. Chad, before we let you go, and again, thank you for being with us all National Signing Day long. Before we let you go, though, anything that you're watching in particular, whether it be storylines or players where they end up, is there anything that you're watching really closely as we head into the 2024 cycle and beyond?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you're going to look at the teams at the top. I think it's going to be fun to watch, like Josh said, Alabama versus Georgia. Again, you expect both of those teams to be right where they are right now in the end, 1 and 2. I think, obviously, Ohio State, Clemson. How does Napier, bounce back this cycle? What does Dan Lanning do with his first full recruiting cycle in 2024? But obviously, it's going to be fun, like Josh said. I mean, Justin Scott's flirted with, a commitment. Notre Dame was trending there. There's going to be some early decisions probably in March and April. And then by the time we hit June 1st, it's going to be crazy. June, July, official visits, tons of commitments around that July 4th weekend. Typically, a lot of big names will come off the board, I think, before their senior year once again this year.
How about Michigan State being at top 10?
Yeah.
Big time.
Really
Big
surprising
time
to see them in there at number 10. But, JD, that's it. That's it for the 2023 class. As the ink dries, we move on to 2024. It's going to be a blast covering it on 3. Thank you for allowing me to tell the story of the 2023 class with you guys. Can't wait to take this thing into 2024. For JD PicKell, for Chad Simmons, I'm Josh Newberg. Thanks for joining us on this Signing Day live show.